My daughter looked me straight in the eye and said, "In 8 days, this house will be ours and you'll be in a care facility." Behind her, her boyfriend smiled and tapped a stack of legal papers against his palm. I thought the worst part was over when they drove away that afternoon. It wasn't. 3 days later, I tried to pay a simple insurance bill and discovered every account I owned had been frozen. Then I found the document I had signed for my daughter. It wasn't a loan form, it was something far more dangerous. Thank you for being here with me today. Before we dive in, drop a comment and let me know, is it morning, afternoon, or late night? Where you are, I read every single one, and your thoughts truly matter. Quick note, some details are fictionalized for storytelling. Any resemblance to real people or events is purely coincidental. The lesson is what counts. My daughter's boyfriend's hands hit my chest with enough force to slam me against the dining room wall, and I tasted blood. The impact drove the air from my lungs. My shoulders struck the antique wainscoting, the same paneling I'd spent 3 months restoring after Margaret died, sanding each groove by hand, bringing this 1840s waterfront home back to its original glory. Now it dug into my spine while Brent Culver, 37 and built like the college linebacker he'd once been, loomed over me with hands still clenched into fists. At 68, I'd spent 4 decades documenting maritime disasters, surveying damaged hulls, assessing insurance claims, cataloging evidence of what went wrong, never imagining I'd need those same investigation skills to survive my own family. "You're signing these papers, old man," Brent said. His voice carried the flat certainty of someone who'd already decided how this would end. "You're too confused to manage your own affairs anymore." I touched my lip fingers, coming away red. The metallic taste filled my mouth. My daughter Simone stood 3 feet behind Brent, 41 years old and immaculate in pressed slacks, and a silk blouse, watching the violence with the detached interest of someone evaluating property value. That's what chilled me more than the physical blow, the absolute absence of shock or concern on her face. This wasn't an accident. This was planned. Confused, I managed, straightening slowly. My shoulders screamed protest. I built a 40-year career on meticulous documentation. That was before. Simone's voice cut through mine, sharp and cold as a January wind off Port Royal Sound. She stepped forward, heels clicking against the heart pine floor I'd refinished myself. Before the memory problems. Before you started forgetting to pay bills, wandering outside at odd hours, leaving the stove on. I stared at my daughter. My only daughter, the child I'd raised alone for 3 years after Margaret's death, and saw a stranger. Papers lay scattered across the floor between us where they'd fallen during the confrontation. Legal documents with bold headers reading "Petition for Guardianship and Property Deed Transfer." The guardianship hearing is set for next week. Simone continued bending to gather the papers with practiced efficiency. "This can go easy or hard, but it's happening. You can sign the voluntary transfer documents now, or we can let a judge decide you're incompetent. Either way, this house and your assets are going into a managed trust. With you as trustee." I wasn't asking. The pieces were assembling with horrible clarity. "This isn't about protecting me. This is about stealing everything I have." Brent took a step closer. I tensed, but Simone raised one hand and he stopped. "It's about making sure you're taken care of," she said, her tone suggesting she was explaining something obvious to a child. "The memory care facility in Hilton Head has an opening. We've already put down the deposit, $20,000, Dad. We're investing in your care. The least you can do is make the legal transition smooth. Memory care facility." The words hit harder than Brent's shove. I wasn't confused. I wasn't wandering. I'd never forgotten to pay a bill in my life or left a stove burning. Every accusation was a lie, carefully constructed, and I could see in Simone's eyes that she knew I knew. And she didn't care. I'd documented maritime disasters for 4 decades. I never imagined I'd need those investigation skills to survive my own family. "Get out," I said quietly. Simone smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. "This is going to be our house in about 10 days, Dad. You might want to start getting used to that." They left the scattered papers on the floor like litter, the front door solid mahogany original to the house closed, with a sound like a vault ceiling. Through the window I watched them climb into Simone's Lexus and pull away down Palmetto Drive, disappearing into the golden afternoon light of September in Beaufort. I stood alone in my dining room tasting blood, and tried to understand when my daughter had become someone capable of this. Around me, the familiar house held its breath. Outside, sailboats drifted across Port Royal Sound like they had every day for the past 3 years, since Margaret died, since I'd retired from 40 years, as a maritime surveyor, with the firm of Hartwell and Associates, since I'd begun this quiet chapter of my life in the historic home we'd restored together. 7 days ago, none of this had started yet. 7 days ago, I'd stood on my back porch at dawn coffee, steaming in my favorite chipped mug, the one Margaret bought me in Charleston 30 years ago, watching shrimp boats head out toward the barrier islands. September mornings in the Low Country carried a particular quality of light, golden and soft, with the heat of summer, finally breaking into something gentler. The air smelled like salt marsh and pluff mud, that distinctive coastal perfume tourists sometimes found overwhelming, but I'd loved for 40 years. Rena, my 7-year-old golden retriever, had pressed her nose against my knee, and I'd scratched behind her ears while mentally planning the weekend. My granddaughter Olivia was supposed to visit Saturday. I'd promised her favorite crab cakes, the recipe Margaret perfected after 2 decades of experimentation. 40 years surveying damaged vessels taught me to spot structural weakness, I'd said aloud to Rena, who'd tilted her head with patient attention. I never saw the weakness in my own family. But that morning, 7 days ago, there'd been no weakness to see. Just peace. Just the quiet satisfaction of a life well lived, a career completed with honor, a home maintained with pride. Just a 68-year-old widower looking forward to his granddaughter's visit. Margaret would have seen through Simone immediately. I was too lonely to look closely. That was 7 days ago. 7 days when I still believed my daughter loved me. As I stood on that peaceful porch just 1 week earlier, watching sailboats glide across Port Royal Sound, I had no idea my daughter and her boyfriend were already planning my imprisonment. The trap was already set. I just hadn't felt it close yet. They were already in motion, already driving toward Beaufort with luggage and lies, and a scheme refined enough to fool even a man who'd spent 40 years investigating fraud and failure. The sound of tires on the shell-paved driveway pulled me from the morning paper. Through the window, I watched Simone's Lexus stop beside the oleander bushes. My daughter climbed out, first, then Brent. They'd been living in my guest wing for 6 weeks since Simone said she needed help while job hunting, but something about this arrival felt staged. My granddaughter Olivia unfolded from the back seat, 15 and usually bright with questions about my salvage stories, but this morning she kept her eyes on her phone like a lifeline. Her shoulders curved inward. The front door opened with urgency. Brent's footsteps hit the floor hard and fast. "Dad, we need to talk," Simone said, appearing in the doorway. She never called me Dad anymore, hadn't since Margaret died. Always Leland. The sudden intimacy landed wrong. "What's happened?" I folded the paper. Brent dropped into the chair across from me. "I need 50,000 by Friday or I lose everything. The company's consolidating offices. They're requiring capital investments from senior adjusters to maintain partnership status. I'd spent 40 years evaluating insurance claims. Brent supposedly worked as a commercial adjuster. The story didn't align. "Which company?" I asked. "Coastal Atlantic Underwriters," Simone answered before Brent could speak. The speed of her response, my surveyor's instincts, cataloged it automatically. "They handle maritime and property claims. Brent's been with them for 8 years. 7. Brent corrected, then caught himself. 7 years this October. 7 years in commercial insurance, and he needed his girlfriend to name his employer. "I need you to co-sign a bridge loan," Brent continued. 50,000 using your property as collateral. Temporary 60 days maximum. We'll pay you back with interest. Why not use your own equity?" I looked at Simone. "You bought that condo in Mount Pleasant 2 years ago? Already leveraged for Brent's business opportunity last spring," Simone said smoothly. "The medical billing software startup. We explained this in July. They hadn't? I would have remembered because I'd have asked the questions Margaret trained me to ask. What's the business model? Who are the principals?" I'd asked nothing in July because no startup had been mentioned. I'd inspected 1,000 damaged hulls. I knew what it looked like when someone patched over structural rot instead of repairing the frame. This story had patch jobs everywhere. But Simone was my daughter. 6 weeks ago, she'd stood in this dining room thinner than I remembered talking about the difficult job market. I'd said yes, because that's what fathers do. "50,000 is substantial," I said. "Let me call my attorney. Lawrence can review." "There's no time." Simone pulled a folder from her bag. "Pre-organized professional. The investment window closes Friday. Lawrence is in Atlanta through Monday. We've already consulted with a financial attorney who prepared the paperwork." She spread 3 documents across my dining table on the same wood, where Margaret and I had shared 40 years of dinners. "Just your signature here and here," Simone said, producing my pen the Mont Blanc Margaret gave me when I made senior surveyor. "This authorizes Brent to handle the loan paperwork on your behalf since you're the guarantor." Every instinct I'd honed across 4 decades screamed no. In 40 years of marine insurance claims, I'd never signed a document without reading every word twice, without having my attorney review it, without sleeping on it overnight. "Dad," Simone said softly, her hand touching my shoulder, "please. Brent's career is everything we've built together. If he loses this position, we lose the stability we need to get married, to give Olivia the life she deserves." Through the kitchen doorway, I could see Olivia standing very still by the refrigerator watching us. "You're getting married?" I asked. "Spring," Simone said, and her smile looked almost real. "We wanted to tell you properly, but everything's been chaotic." Brent reached across the table, gripping my hand. "Thanks, Dad. You're saving my career. I won't forget this." The weight of it settled on me. My daughter's future, my granddaughter's stability, the family Margaret and I had built. What was 50,000 against all that? What was caution against family? I picked up the pen. The documents blurred without my reading glasses. I could see signature lines, official seals, dense legal text. The headers read something about financial authorization and guarantor responsibilities. "Just here," Simone guided my hand to the first line, "and here on the second page." The pen moved. My signature, Leland Chambers, in the same flowing script I'd used on 10,000 maritime survey reports, appeared on the pages. Once, twice, 3 times. The pen left the paper. Something in my chest went cold, like the moment you feel a ship's deck shift wrong beneath your feet. Simone gathered the documents with practiced efficiency, sliding them into her folder. Brent stood, his panic evaporating into something harder to read. "We'll have the loan processed by tomorrow," Simone said, kissing my cheek. The gesture felt performative, meant for Olivia. "Thank you, Leland. You've always been there when I needed you." They left through the front door. I heard the Lexus start, heard the tires crunch back down the driveway, heard the sound fade toward Palmetto Drive. Olivia lingered in the kitchen doorway. "Grandpa, she started." "Go on," I said more sharply than I intended. "They're waiting." She fled. I sat alone at my dining table and pulled the papers back toward me. They'd left 1 copy. Standard practice for guarantor agreements. I found my reading glasses in my shirt pocket and actually read what I'd signed. The header didn't say loan cosigner agreement. It said durable financial power of attorney. I'd just given my daughter legal control over every dollar I owned. 3 days passed while I told myself there had to be an explanation. 3 days while I convinced myself that the power of attorney was a mistake in paperwork, that Simone would correct it, that I'd misread something in my panic. Then I tried to pay my quarterly property insurance premium. The bank's website denied my password 3 times before displaying a message I'd never seen in 40 years of banking account access restricted, contact branch manager. I sat at my home office desk, the same desk where I'd prepared 10,000 maritime survey reports, where every number had always added up, where documentation meant truth, and felt the floor tilt beneath me. I called Low Country Credit Union. The hold music played for 8 minutes. "Mr. Chambers," the representative said when she finally picked up. She sounded young, uncertain. "I see your accounts were restructured on September 10th under durable power of attorney. You'll need to coordinate with Brent Culver for any transactions over $100. I signed a loan guarantor form," I said, hearing my voice climb higher than I intended. "Not account restructuring authorization. Sir, I'm looking at notarized documentation filed 3 days ago. All checking and savings accounts are now under joint control. The signature is yours. How much is in those accounts? I can't disclose specific. It's my money. How much?" A pause. Computer keys clicking. "As of this morning, $419,200 across 3 accounts. But again, sir, you'll need Mr. Culver's authorization for..." I hung up. $420,000. My entire life savings. 40 years of careful investing. Margaret's life insurance, the sale of our first home in Charleston, everything we'd built. frozen, locked behind a gate that required my daughter's boyfriend to open. I called Brent's cell phone. He answered on the first ring. "We need to talk," I said. "Now." "We're on our way," he said, and disconnected. On our way, as if he'd been expecting this call, as if he'd been waiting. They arrived within 40 minutes. Too fast for someone supposedly caught off guard. I met them in the living room, still holding the phone. Brent dropped onto my sofa Margaret's favorite, the one she'd found at an estate sale in Georgetown, with the casual ownership of someone who'd already decided this was his house. "Dad," he said, and the words sounded rehearsed. "At your age, managing this much money is stressful. We're taking that burden off you. You should be enjoying retirement, not worrying about accounts." "I wasn't worried about my accounts until you stole access to them." Simone sat beside Brent, her posture rigid with professional composure. She'd worn a navy suit, as if this were a business meeting. Perhaps to her it was. Under South Carolina code, a durable financial power of attorney grants comprehensive management authority. She said, her voice carried the flat precision of someone reciting memorized text. "This is completely legal, and frankly, overdue. Your age puts you at risk for financial exploitation. We're protecting you." I'd surveyed ships after hurricanes, seen vessels that looked intact above the waterline, but were taking on water through invisible hull breaches. That's what this was. The damage was catastrophic. I just couldn't see how deep yet. "I didn't authorize you to lock me out of my own money," I said. "You're not locked out," Brent said. "You just need to ask permission now. That's how guardianship works." "That's not guardianship. That's theft." He smiled. No warmth in it, just the mechanical movement of lips. "Call it what you want. The law's on our side. You want to buy something, you ask me. Simple." "And if I refuse to ask?" Simone leaned forward. "Then you'll find it very difficult to pay for food utilities, property taxes, insurance, medical care, or anything else you need to maintain this house and your lifestyle. We control the money, Leland. All of it." She'd stopped calling me Dad. Dropped straight back to my first name like I was a client or a stranger. "I'm 68 years old, not incapacitated," I said. "I spent 40 years managing complex financial instruments for maritime insurance claims. I think I can handle my own checking account." "Clearly not, or you wouldn't have signed away control of it." Brent stood stretching like this conversation bored him. "Look, we're not trying to make this difficult. We're ensuring proper asset management during your declining years. You'll thank us eventually." "My declining? Dad?" He said it harder this time, with an edge that reminded me of the man who'd shoved me against a wall 7 days from now. "This conversation is over. You need money, you call me. You want to make a purchase, you ask permission. That's how this works now. Deal with it." He walked past me toward the front door. Simone followed, but paused at the threshold, pulling a folder from her leather bag. "Oh," she said, as if remembering something trivial. "We'll need you to sign these property evaluation forms. Just routine estate planning. Our attorney says it's standard practice when financial management transfers." She set the folder on the entry table, the antique piece Margaret and I had refinished together during our first year in this house, and walked out without waiting for a response. I heard their car start, heard the tires crunch away down the driveway, heard silence settle back over my home like ash. My son stood 3 feet away, but I was looking at a stranger wearing a face I'd known for 42 years. Except he wasn't my son. Brent was just Simone's boyfriend. That's what made the dad so obscene. I'd welcomed him into my home, fed him at my table, trusted him with my family, and he'd weaponized that kindness. I opened the folder Simone had left. The forms were professionally prepared, densely worded, thick with legal terminology, but the footer on each page carried the same stamp in small gray: "Text transfer on incompetency determination conditional. Deed conveyance upon medical certification." They weren't planning estate transfers for after I died. They were planning them while I was still alive. They wanted doctors to certify me incompetent, wanted legal authority to transfer my property, this house, this land, the waterfront view Margaret and I had saved 15 years to afford, into their names before I was even gone. The $420,000 was just the beginning. They wanted everything, and they had 7 days left to take it. 2 days. I gave myself 2 days to find a solution that didn't involve signing those incompetency forms. 2 days to understand what legal recourse I had, to figure out how to regain control of my finances, to prove I wasn't the confused old man they claimed I was. I started with my files. The filing cabinet drawer hung empty. Every deed, insurance policy, and original document I'd kept for 40 years was gone. I stood in my home office staring at the alphabetized folders that now contained only photocopies. Property deed photocopy. Life insurance policy photocopy. Mortgage satisfaction papers photocopy. Bank statements photocopy. Everything that proved ownership, everything with original signatures and official seals, everything that had legal weight removed. 40 years of surveying taught me one rule: whoever controls the original documentation controls the claim. They had everything. I checked the locked drawer at the bottom. The key was still on my ring, but the drawer opened easily, too easily, because the lock mechanism had been forced. Inside, empty. My wife's death certificate, my birth certificate, my military discharge papers, Margaret's jewelry insurance appraisal, all gone. Only then did I remember 3 days ago, when they'd come to announce their financial takeover, Simone had asked to use the restroom. She'd been upstairs for 15 minutes. I'd heard footsteps in the hallway, heard a door close that wasn't the bathroom, but I'd been too focused on arguing with Brent to investigate. Systematic, premeditated, they'd planned every step. I reached for the phone to call Lawrence, my attorney, then stopped. What would I tell him that my daughter and her boyfriend had taken documents from my house? They lived here. They could claim I'd asked them to secure important papers. They could say I'd been confused, forgetful, that they were protecting documents from my own carelessness. Who would the police believe? A 68-year-old man claiming theft, or the concerned family members with a notarized power of attorney, proving they had legal authority to manage his affairs? The sound of tires on the driveway pulled me to the window. Simone's Lexus. They'd been gone all morning, probably to a bank or attorney's office, probably filing more paperwork, probably tightening the trap. I met them at the front door before they could use their key. Where are my original property documents? The words came out harder than I intended. You had no right to take them. Brent pushed past me into the house. We have every right. We're managing your estate. My estate isn't yours to manage. Those documents are safer with us than in your confused hands, Simone said, closing the door behind her. She looked tired, not guilty, not uncomfortable, just tired, like I was an exhausting obligation. I want them back, now. Brent turned to face me. Something in his posture had shifted. The false concern, the manufactured patience, it was gone. What remained was something colder. You don't get to demand anything anymore, old man, he said, and his voice carried an edge I'd never heard before. Those documents are in a safe deposit box, for your protection, for my... The laugh that came out of me sounded broken. You've stolen my money, my documents, my autonomy. Don't insult me by calling it protection. He moved fast, faster than I expected from someone his size. His hand caught the front of my shirt and yanked me forward, then slammed me backward against the office door frame. My head hit the historic plaster, the same plaster Margaret and I had carefully restored 15 years ago with a sound like a crack splitting wood. Pain exploded through my skull. The room tilted. I'm calling the police, I managed. He shoved me again, and this time I couldn't catch myself. My hip hit the desk corner. My knees buckled. I went down hard onto the hardwood floor, catching myself on my palms. At 68, falling isn't just painful, it's terrifying. Every impact carries the weight of fractures, breaks the knowledge that healing takes months instead of weeks. And tell them what? Brent stood over me, his shadow falling across my face. That your son-in-law is helping manage your failing memory? They'll put you in a home. Not son. Not even son-in-law, they weren't married. Just my daughter's boyfriend. A man I'd welcomed into my house, fed at my table, treated like family. And now he had his hand raised like he might strike me again. Brent, Simone's voice came from the doorway, not shocked, not horrified, just measured, calculating. That's enough, for now. For now. I'd seen this pattern before in my work, the secondary damage always worse than the initial impact. The hull breach is never as dangerous as the secondary flooding you don't see coming. This violence was the breach. What came next would be the flood. Brent stepped back, his breathing heavy. He looked at Simone, and something passed between them. Not words, but understanding. She gave the slightest nod. Approval. Permission. This wasn't spontaneous rage. This was tactical. They'd discussed this. They'd planned when violence would become necessary. You need time to understand this is for your own protection, Simone said, and she might have been discussing weather. We're not your enemies, Leland. We're the only family you have left. Marcus. I still had my son, Marcus, and Olivia, my granddaughter. But they were far away, and I realized with horrible clarity that Simone was counting on that distance. They left me there on the floor. I heard their footsteps retreat down the hallway, heard the guest wing door close the wing where they'd been living for 6 weeks, the wing that now felt like enemy occupation of my own home. I pulled myself up slowly, using the desk for leverage. My head throbbed, my hips screamed. I was too old for this. Too old to be shoved around by younger, stronger people who decided I was in their way. Movement outside the window caught my attention. Constance Whitley stood frozen in her garden next door, pruning shears in one hand, the other pressed against her mouth. My 72-year-old neighbor, who'd lived beside Margaret and me for 20 years, who'd brought casseroles after Margaret died, who waved from her porch every morning. Our eyes met across the property line through my office window. She'd seen everything. For the first time in days, something in my chest unclenched slightly. I wasn't alone. Someone knew. Someone had witnessed what they were doing to me. Constance lowered her hand slowly, and I saw her mouth form words I couldn't hear, but understood completely. I'll help you. 3 hours after they left, a soft knock rattled the fence boards between our properties. I'd been sitting in darkness at my kitchen table, afraid to turn on lights that might draw Simone's attention from the guest wing. The knock came again, barely audible over the September night sounds of cicadas and distant boats on the Sound. Constance Whitley stood at the fence line carrying a first aid kit and the expression of someone who'd made a decision. I crossed the yard as quietly as my aching hip allowed. The motion sensor light stayed dark. I'd disabled it days ago at Simone's request. She'd said the brightness disturbed her sleep. Now I understood it was about controlling visibility, about ensuring no one witnessed what happened in this house after dark. I saw what he did, Constance said without preamble. Her voice stayed low but firm. And more importantly, I saw her watching. That woman orchestrated it, Leland. I've seen enough abusers to know the pattern. At 72, Constance carried herself with the steady competence of someone who'd spent a lifetime managing crises. She'd been a hospice nurse for 35 years. Before retiring, had sat with dying patients and their families through their worst moments. If anyone could recognize predatory behavior, it was her. They've taken my money, my documents, everything, I said, and hearing it spoken aloud made it more real. I can't even call for help without them knowing. They control my accounts, monitor my phone. Then we communicate through me. She pulled out her cell phone, the screen glowing blue in the darkness. My phone, my house. My witness testimony, if it comes to that. You're not alone in this. Something in my chest unclenched for the first time in days. Since Margaret died, since I'd been navigating this house and this life alone, I'd forgotten what it felt like to have someone in my corner. I need to document this. Constance continued, nodding toward the first aid kit. The injuries. Professional nursing assessment. If this goes to court, we need evidence that predates whatever false narrative they're building. She was right. In 40 years of maritime insurance investigation, I'd seen countless cases won or lost on documentation timing. Whoever established the first paper trail controlled the story. We worked quickly. Constance photographed the bruises forming on my shoulder, the swelling where my head had struck the doorframe, the scrapes on my palms from catching myself on the floor. Her touch was gentle but efficient, and she narrated each injury into her phone's voice recorder with clinical precision. Location, size, coloration, mechanism of injury. I've been watching them for weeks, she said as she worked. The way your daughter speaks to you in the driveway, how that boyfriend follows 2 steps behind you whenever you go outside like a guard more than family. Last week I saw her go through your mail before you got home. I should have said something sooner. You couldn't have known. I did know. I just didn't want to overstep. She closed the first aid kit with a snap. That ends now. What do you need? A lawyer. My attorney is Lawrence Thornton. We worked together for 20 years, maritime insurance law. If anyone understands financial fraud and documentation... Lawrence Thornton. Constance's face shifted with recognition. From Low Country Legal, he handled my husband Walter's estate 6 years ago when Walter died. Good man. Meticulous with details. He'll remember me. For the first time since signing those papers, I wasn't calculating odds alone. I had an ally who'd witnessed the truth. The relief must have shown on my face because Constance reached through the fence boards and gripped my hand. "I'll call him first thing tomorrow morning," she said. "But we need to establish how to communicate until then. They're watching you, but they don't know I'm involved yet. We keep it that way." We worked out a system with the efficiency of people who understood the stakes. A specific window in my office curtains open meant safe to approach. Curtains closed meant Simone or Brent were home and watching. If I needed her urgently, I'd move the potted geranium from the porch to the front steps, visible from her kitchen window. After dark, fence-lined meetings, when I could slip out unnoticed. "Tell Lawrence they have my original property deed. Life insurance policy, birth certificate, everything with legal weight," I said. "Tell him it's not about the money anymore, it's about survival." "I'll tell him." She paused, studying my face in the dim light from her porch. "Leland, this is going to get worse before it gets better. People like your daughter don't give up control easily when they realize you're fighting back." I know. I did know. I'd documented enough maritime disasters to understand how ships went down slowly at first, then all at once. "But I can't just surrender." "No," she agreed. "You can't, but you also can't fight alone. In maritime salvage, they say you never raise a sunken ship alone. You need a surface team, coordinating rescue efforts from where they can still breathe. Constance was my surface team." She disappeared back into her house through the garden gate, taking the first aid kit and her phone full of evidence with her. I watched her kitchen light come on, watched her silhouette move past the window, and felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. Then I turned back toward my own house and froze. Bedroom lights had flickered on in the guest wing. Simone's Lexus sat in the driveway, but I hadn't heard it arrive. They'd returned without headlights, parking in shadow, and I'd been too focused on Constance to notice. Through my living room window, I could see movement. Simone stood in the center of the room with her phone raised, photographing something. She moved methodically, deliberately, capturing angles of the furniture, the coffee table, the bookshelf. She crouched down, photographing the floor, then stood and took close-ups of the fireplace mantel. She wasn't documenting valuables for theft. She was documenting disorder confusion evidence of an old man who couldn't maintain his own home. The counter-investigation had already begun. While I'd been building my defense, they'd been building their case to declare me incompetent. By morning, I understood what she'd been documenting. Not evidence of my incompetence, evidence of the environment they'd used to trigger it, the disordered living room, the unwashed dishes, the chaos they'd create and photograph as proof of my declining ability to maintain my own home. I woke Sunday with a plan to maintain normalcy church at 10 grocery shopping after the routines that had structured my weeks since Margaret died. Routine kept you grounded when everything else shifted beneath your feet. My car keys weren't on the hallway hook where I'd hung them every night for 26 years. I checked the bowl on the entry table, the kitchen counter, my office desk, the bedroom dresser. Nothing. Then I heard voices in the kitchen, multiple voices. Movement, the sound of cabinet doors opening and closing. Brent and Simone sat at my kitchen table with coffee and what looked like a professional planning session. Luggage sat stacked by the stairs. Not overnight bags. Full suitcases. They'd moved in. "I'm going to church," I said from the doorway. "Where are my keys?" Simone didn't look up from the folder open in front of her. "You're not driving anymore. Dr. Hendricks's preliminary assessment shows significant cognitive markers. It's not safe." "I never saw Dr. Hendricks." "We had him review your behavior patterns based on our observations over the past month." She pulled a document from the folder, sliding it across the table toward me. Official letterhead, dense paragraphs of medical terminology, a signature at the bottom. "His professional opinion is documented. Would you like to contest it in probate court? Because the guardianship hearing is set for October 23rd. That's 3 weeks to prove you're mentally competent, while we're documenting every confused moment, every lapse, every sign that you can't manage your own affairs. Dr. William Hendricks, M.D., Geriatric Psychiatry." I'd never heard the name before in my life. The assessment cited memory lapses, difficulty with financial management, confusion about recent events, wandering behavior. Every symptom fabricated, every observation a lie, every conclusion designed to strip away my legal rights. "This is fraud," I said. "This is medical evaluation based on direct observation by concerned family members." Simone's voice carried the flat precision of rehearsed testimony. "You can challenge it, but that requires legal representation you can't afford without access to your frozen accounts. which you can't access without our approval, which we won't give while your competency is under review. See how this works. They'd built a perfect loop. Every escape route required resources they controlled. Brent stood crossing the kitchen in 3 strides, his hand extended toward me, palm up. Phone, he said. What? Your cell phone. You've been getting confused by spam calls. We're protecting you from financial scams. Everything goes through us now. I'm not giving you my phone. His expression hardened. I saw the violence in it, remembered the feel of his hands, shoving me into walls, and my body made the decision my pride couldn't. I pulled the phone from my pocket and placed it in his palm. He powered it down, immediately pocketing it like confiscated contraband. They'd moved in. Luggage sat by the stairs. They weren't visiting to help manage my affairs. They were occupying my home. You can have supervised phone privileges, Simone said, gathering the medical assessment back into her folder. When you need to make calls, you ask me. I'll dial for you and monitor the conversation to ensure you're not being taken advantage of by scammers. I need to call my attorney. Lawrence Thornton is on the approved contact list. Would you like me to place that call now? She knew I wouldn't. Not with her listening, not with every word monitored and recorded. They'd isolated me completely, no transportation, no phone, no privacy. I walked through my house in a daze, and that's when I noticed the cameras. Small black mounted in the corners where walls met ceilings. One in the living room, one in the hallway outside my bedroom, one in the kitchen angled toward the table and back door. Professional installation, discreet but comprehensive. When did you put those up? I asked when I found Simone unpacking clothes in the guest room. My guest room now, apparently their permanent quarters. Friday while you were resting, she said without looking up from the suitcase. For your safety in case of falls. At your age, we need to monitor for medical emergencies. Those cameras aren't for falls. You're monitoring me like a prisoner. We're documenting your daily patterns for the competency evaluation. It's standard procedure for guardianship cases. The court needs to see how you function in your normal environment. Normal. Nothing about this was normal. I tried the front door next. The knob turned, but the door didn't open. Deadbolt locked from the inside, and my key no longer fit. The back door same. Even the door from the garage, new lock, my key useless. When did you change my locks? I asked Brent, who'd appeared behind me in the hallway. Last week. For security. You kept forgetting to lock up at night. He smiled without warmth. Don't worry. We'll let you use the backyard for fresh air. Front door stays locked. We'll let you know when you're allowed visitors. Allowed visitors. In my own home. The home Margaret and I had bought 26 years ago, had restored together, had filled with 40 years of memories. The waterfront property worth $650,000 that Simone was systematically converting into my prison. In maritime law, when a ship is seized in port, they call it arrest a vessel. That's what this was, arrest without charges, imprisonment without trial. I retreated to my bedroom, the only space that still felt like mine, and that's when I saw Simone through the window. She stood in the guest room, looking out at the backyard, her gaze fixed on the fence line between my property and Constance's. She could see Constance's kitchen window from there, could monitor any signals, any communication attempts. As I watched, she smiled, not the cold professional smile she'd been wearing, but something satisfied and cruel, then pulled the blinds closed, cutting off the view. That fence line was my only link to help, and she knew it. But Simone didn't know I'd already established contact. Didn't know Constance had my injuries documented, had promised to call Lawrence, had evidence they couldn't control or erase. And she didn't know that maritime surveyors spend 40 years learning to document evidence in ways others miss. They thought the cameras would keep me docile. They thought surveillance meant control. But 40 years of maritime investigation had taught me something they'd never considered. The documented always assume the investigator is visible. Tuesday morning, alone in my house for the first time since they moved in, I stopped being a victim and became what I'd been for 40 years, an investigator. Simone and Brent left at 8, dressed for work in clothes that suggested professional obligations I half believed were real. The BMW pulled out of the driveway, and I watched through the living room window until it disappeared toward the highway. The house settled into silence, except for the faint electronic hum of the security cameras recording everything. Everything visible anyway. I went to the garage through the door off the kitchen. The camera in the hallway captured me entering, but there was no camera inside the garage itself they'd focused on. Living spaces. Not Storage. Among the boxes of Margaret's things I couldn't bear to sort, and the tools I'd accumulated over decades, I found what I needed, my old maritime survey field kit. The waterproof documentation case was exactly where I'd left it 3 years ago when I retired. Inside Polaroid instant camera injury assessment charts, evidence preservation protocols printed on waterproof paper, measurement tools, incident report forms. The camera was ancient technology now, but that's what made it perfect. No digital files to discover, no cloud storage to hack, no metadata to track. Just physical photographs that existed in one place only. Every maritime claim requires 3 elements: photographic evidence, witness testimony, and documented timeline. I had the first 2 now. Constance provided witness testimony. The Polaroid would provide evidence they couldn't erase. The bathroom was the only room without a camera they'd claimed privacy concerns when I'd noticed, but I suspected they simply hadn't thought I'd need surveillance in there. Sick people need privacy for dignity. That oversight was my advantage. I locked the bathroom door and stripped off my shirt. The bruises had developed fully over 4 days. My right shoulder showed the deep purple where Brent's hands had gripped and thrown me. My left hip, the one that hit the desk corner, had bloomed into a spectacular spread of yellow and green, surrounding the dark impact point. My spine, where I'd struck the doorframe, showed a linear contusion pattern that no one could claim was accidental. I photographed each injury from multiple angles, like I'd photographed hull damage for 40 years. Polaroids emerged with that mechanical whir I remembered developing slowly from blank white to incriminating evidence. I labeled each one with injury location date, received mechanism of injury, and the date photographed. Maritime methodology applied to domestic violence. A career built on spotting fabricated evidence had taught me exactly what to look for. Simone's photographs last week documented confusion, but I could document abuse. The difference was truth versus fiction, and truth always showed in the details. I'd surveyed damaged vessels my entire career. Now I was surveying the wreckage of my own family, documenting the casualty with the same methodical precision. The Polaroids went into a waterproof evidence sleeve. The sleeve went inside an old maritime incident report folder that I tucked into the bottom of my filing cabinet behind 20-year-old tax returns. They'd already stolen my important documents. They wouldn't look twice at archive paperwork. They'd dismissed as worthless. Next timeline documentation. I pulled out a legal pad and began writing. September 7th, Simone and Brent arrived with fabricated loan emergency. I sign what I believe are guarantor documents, actually financial power of attorney. September 10th. Discover all bank accounts frozen under joint control. $420,000 in savings inaccessible. September 12th. Original property documents stolen from filing cabinets. September 15th. Physical assault by Brent Culver. Witnessed by Constance Whitley. October 1st. House arrest established. Car keys confiscated, cell phone taken, locks, changed, surveillance cameras installed. October 3rd, forced isolation continues. Every entry detailed, every date precise, every fact verifiable. The kind of documentation that held up in court because maritime insurance claims taught you that judges respected meticulous record keeping. I was searching my old files for evidence preservation protocols when I found a business card wedged into a case folder from 1998, yellowed with age, but still legible. Victor Rossi, maritime insurance fraud. Investigator, federal jurisdiction, elder financial exploitation. 8-435-55-0147 office. On the back, handwritten in faded ink, personal cell 8-435-55-0189. Call anytime. VR. Memory rush back. The Miller case, 1998. Shipping company owner whose elderly father was targeted by a caregiver using the exact same pattern power of attorney asset isolation, fabricated incompetence. Victor Rossi had been the federal investigator who'd broken it open, connecting maritime fraud expertise to elder abuse prosecution. He'd told me then, these patterns repeat because they work. If you ever see it happening to someone, call me. Elder exploitation follows the same methodology as insurance fraud. Isolate the asset control, the documentation manufacture, incompetence. I'd never imagined that someone would be me. I read the card 3 times, checking the dates. 1998 to 2024. 26 years. Was he still practicing? Still in Charleston? Still taking cases? I pulled out my old Hartwell and Associates directory from the shelf. The maritime insurance industry was small, interconnected. If Victor Rossi was still active, someone would know. Then I remembered I had no phone. They'd confiscated it. I couldn't call anyone without asking permission, without Simone dialing and monitoring. But Constance could. 40 years of professional training had prepared me for this moment. I just never expected the crime scene to be my own living room. I slipped Rossi's card into the waterproof evidence sleeve with the Polaroids. When I met Constance at the fence line tonight, I'd give her the number. She could call from her phone, establish contact, explain the situation. Federal jurisdiction meant Rossi could operate across state lines if Simone's fraud extended beyond South Carolina. It meant resources Brent and Simone couldn't control. It meant hope. I was returning the evidence folder to its hiding place when I heard the sound tires on gravel, too soon, too early. The BMW. Through the office window, I watched Simone climb out of the driver's seat with her phone pressed against her ear. Her free hand gestured urgently, her expression tight, with stress or anger or alarm I couldn't tell from this distance. Brent emerged from the passenger side, his posture tense. They were supposed to be gone until 5. It was barely 11. They discovered something. But what? I had 30 seconds to hide the evidence folder before they reached the door. The Polaroids and Victor Rossi's card went back into the filing cabinet bottom drawer, buried under tax returns from 2001. My hands shook as I closed the drawer. They swept through the door like prosecutors entering a courtroom, and I knew before Simone spoke that the timeline had collapsed. The hearing is October 23rd. She announced without preamble. No greeting, no explanation for the early return, just the statement delivered with the finality of a verdict. That's 8 days. Court-appointed psychiatrist evaluates you Friday morning at 10. 8 days. The competency hearing had been 6 weeks away. Now it was 8 days. Judge Harrison granted our emergency petition this morning. Simone continued pulling documents from her leather folder, based on documented deteriorating condition and safety concerns. Everything moves quickly when there's risk of self-harm or exploitation by outside parties. She meant Constance. They'd painted my neighbor as the threat. Brent stood behind her, his posture uncomfortable but silent. Something in his expression suggested he hadn't expected this acceleration either, but he'd gone along with it anyway. I never signed petition acknowledgement, I said, hearing my voice steadier than I felt. Simone held up a form. My signature, perfect forgery or scan from the power of attorney documents, sat at the bottom beside a notary seal. Your signature is notarized right here, she said. Perhaps you don't remember signing it. That's exactly the concern the court shares. The trap was elegant. Every defense I mounted would be cited as evidence of the confusion they'd fabricated. Dad, just cooperate with the evaluation, Brent said quietly. Make this easier on everyone. 8 days. I'd spent 8 months investigating some maritime claims. They'd given me 8 days to prove I wasn't incompetent. They left me alone after that, retreating to the guest wing to make phone calls I couldn't hear, but knew were coordinating the final assault. At 6:30, I heard the BMW start again. Through the window, I watched them drive away dressed for dinner. 20 minutes later, Constance appeared at the backyard fence line carrying a covered dish, like she was delivering a neighborly meal. But when she reached the fence boards, what she passed through wasn't food. Her cell phone, warm from her pocket, fit perfectly in my palm. Lawrence is waiting, she whispered urgently. I told him everything I witnessed. He said this is textbook financial exploitation. How long do I have? They left for Harbor House Restaurant. Made a 7 o'clock reservation. I heard Simone on the phone. 40 minutes there and back, minimum hour for dinner. 15 minutes to be safe. 15 minutes to explain 4 weeks of systematic destruction. He remembers you from the maritime insurance days, Constance added. Said you were the most meticulous investigator he ever worked with. He's standing by. I dialed the number she'd written on her palm in ballpoint ink. Lawrence Thornton answered on the first ring. Leland Chambers, he said, and his voice carried 30 years of credit union fraud investigation experience. Constance told me the basics. Talk fast. I'm recording this with your permission. Permission granted. The words came in a rush. My daughter forced me to sign financial power of attorney under false pretenses. All accounts frozen, $420,000 inaccessible. They've stolen original property documents. Physical assault witnessed by Constance September 15th. House arrest established October 1st. Keys, confiscated, phone taken. Locks, changed, surveillance installed. Competency hearing accelerated to 8 days from now. I need help. Silence for 3 seconds. Then Leland, this is felony elder financial exploitation. The accelerated hearing is their kill shot. Once guardianship is granted, you lose all legal standing to challenge anything. Can you stop it? I can file an emergency adult protective services report by morning. I know the lead investigator through fraud prevention, work at Low Country Credit Union. We've collaborated on financial abuse cases. But you need evidence, hard evidence. I have photographs, injuries documented with dates, timeline written like a maritime casualty report, witness testimony from Constance. Lawrence's voice carried the steady certainty of someone who'd spent decades evaluating financial risk. For the first time since signing those papers, I had a professional on my side. Good, he said. That's exactly what I need. Listen carefully. The psychiatric evaluation Friday is crucial. They'll try to establish confusion, memory problems, inability to manage affairs. You need to demonstrate competency without revealing you've built a defense team. Can you do that? 40 years of maritime investigation. I can appear cooperative while documenting everything. Perfect. Now give me your daughter's full name, approximate age, and any occupation history. Simone Chambers, 41, claims to work in real estate title examination, but I'm not certain that's current. Boyfriend is Brent Culver, 37. Chambers is her married name or birth name. Birth name. She's never been married despite claiming engagement to Brent. Computer keys clicked in the background. Lawrence was already searching. I'll run financial background tonight, he said. Bank activity, credit history, criminal records, civil judgments. If she's done this before, and the pattern you're describing suggests she has, there'll be traces. Previous victims, previous POA, grants previous unexplained asset transfers. In 8 days. I'll have preliminary results by morning. Full workup by Thursday. If there's a pattern, I'll find it. He paused. Leland, I need to ask. Has she mentioned life insurance? My blood went cold. I have a policy. $500,000. She has the original documents stolen with everything else. Beneficiary. My son Marcus. But with power of attorney, can she change beneficiaries? Yes. File claims potentially. That's attempted fraud if she's initiated any changes. I'll check for recent policy modifications. Constance appeared beside me, gesturing frantically. Headlights on the road. They're back, I said. Call me Friday night after the evaluation. Use Constance's phone. I'll have background results, and APS will be investigating by then. Lawrence's voice hardened. Leland, if her financial background shows what I think it will, this isn't her first time targeting maritime professionals. That's a federal pattern. FBI jurisdiction. Federal. Resources Simone couldn't control or manipulate. I ended the call and passed the phone back through the fence boards. Constance disappeared into her garden with the covered dish, ordinary neighbor, heading home after a friendly visit. The BMW pulled into the driveway as I walked back toward the house, my heart still racing but my mind clear. 8 days. Lawrence promised investigation. Adult Protective Services would be involved by tomorrow. I had a defense team Simone didn't know existed. But first I had to survive Friday's psychiatric evaluation without revealing I'd already built a case against her. Wednesday and Thursday I played the role they expected. Confused, defeated, isolated. Simone watched me through the cameras. I watched the clock count down to Friday's evaluation, to the hearing 8 days away, to whatever timeline Lawrence was racing to beat. Then Wednesday afternoon, my granddaughter appeared at the door with resolve in her 15-year-old eyes I'd never seen before. Mom, Olivia called from the entryway. I need my AP history textbook. Ms. Martinez assigned a project due tomorrow, and all my research materials are in Grandpa's guest room. Simone emerged from the kitchen phone, pressed to her ear, nodding at Olivia with distracted permission. My granddaughter slipped past her into the living room, where I sat with a book I wasn't reading, waiting for Friday, waiting for whatever Lawrence might discover. Olivia sat on the ottoman across from my chair, close enough that the camera angle would show her back, blocking me from clear view. She pulled her phone from her backpack, fingers moving across the screen, then leaned forward like she was showing me something innocent. Grandpa, she whispered, voice barely audible, I've been recording them since September. Everything. The planning the lawyer calls what they say about you when you can't hear. My heart stopped. Olivia, listen. She pressed her phone into my palm with a single earbud, her eyes fierce. I started 3 weeks ago when I heard Mom on the phone talking about your deteriorating condition that didn't exist. I knew something was wrong. If they find out you're helping me, I don't care. Her whisper carried steel. You raised Mom when Grandma died. You raised her alone and you loved her, and now she's doing this to you. She's forgotten that. I haven't. From the kitchen, Simone's voice rose with professional authority, still absorbed in her call. Legal terminology timeline discussion, something about property appraisals. Listen to October 18th. Olivia said, her finger tapping the screen. 2 days ago. It's the worst one. You need to hear what they're really planning. She stood moving toward the guest room like she was actually retrieving textbooks, drawing Simone's attention if the call ended. I fit the earbud into my ear, hiding the wire under my collar, and pressed play. Static then, voices crystal clear. Simone. The hearing is the 23rd. Judge Harrison granted emergency petition. He's reliable when you have the right documentation. Guardianship gets granted. We have full control. Brent's voice uncertain. And then what? We're talking about a lot of moving pieces. Simone. Then property appraisal is the 25th. Already scheduled with Baxter Assessment Group. They'll come in at $550, maybe $560 if the market's good. We have a buyer lined up at $550,000 below market, but cash closes fast, no contingencies. That's $100,000 under value. It's immediate liquidity without probate complications. Which brings us to the other asset, the life insurance policy. $500,000 currently naming Marcus as beneficiary. Once we have guardianship, I can execute beneficiary change as his legal guardian. That becomes relevant sooner than later. A pause. Then Brent, his voice dropping, I'm talking about timeline optimization. He's 68. Elderly fall accidents are statistically common. Nature takes its course. We just ensure the paperwork is in order first. Guardianship by the 23rd, property sale by November. First insurance transition by mid-November. A 15-year-old girl had become the witness I needed, documenting evidence while living in the same house with predators. The courage that took was staggering. Simone Christ, you're talking about killing him. I'm talking about reality. He has maybe 10 years left anyway. We're drowning in debt. Your gambling losses put us $200,000 in the hole. This house alone gives us $550 in cash. The insurance gives us another $500,000. We clear our debts and start over. Or we wait and watch some care facility, drain everything he has while we get nothing. There are laws, there are risks and rewards. The risk is minimal if we're patient. Elderly accidents after guardianship rarely get investigated. The reward is $750,000 and freedom from the debt that's destroying us. The recording ended. They weren't planning to exploit me. They were planning to kill me. The difference was everything. I removed the earbud with hands that shook. Olivia reappeared from the guest room carrying a textbook, her face carefully neutral, but her eyes meeting mine with question. I gave the slightest nod. She understood message received. This is evidence of conspiracy to commit murder, I whispered as she leaned down to retrieve her phone, pretending to hug me goodbye. You've just saved my life. Get it to your lawyer, she breathed against my shoulder. I'll keep recording. I'll send updates to Constance's phone. Mom doesn't know I have her number. Olivia, I love you, Grandpa. I'm not letting them do this. She pulled back just as Simone ended her call and returned to the living room, her gaze sharp and assessing. What were you two talking about? She asked. Before I could answer, Olivia turned with perfect teenage nonchalance, textbook tucked under her arm. Grandpa was telling me about his old ship surveys, boring history stuff. I was just being polite. Ship surveys. Simone repeated, her voice flat. Yeah, something about damaged hulls and insurance claims. I wasn't really listening. Olivia yawned, the performance flawless. I need to get started on this project. Ms. Martinez wants 10 pages by Friday. Simone's gaze lingered on me, then Olivia calculating. The silence stretched 3 seconds too long. Go home, she finally said, and next time call before showing up. Sure, Mom. Olivia headed for the door, not looking back, her shoulders straight and steady. I watched my granddaughter leave and felt something I hadn't felt in weeks, certainty. They'd made a mistake. They'd underestimated the 15-year-old girl who'd been paying attention, who'd inherited my attention to detail, and Margaret's protective fury. 48 hours until the psychiatric evaluation, and now I had evidence of murder conspiracy, but only if I could get it to Lawrence, without Simone discovering what her daughter had done. Wednesday night, I slipped out to the fence line. 1 minute was all it took, the file transferred, the evidence passed, the trap baited. By midnight, Constance had reached Lawrence. The murder conspiracy was in an attorney's hands. Thursday morning, the process server's knock carried the weight of legal machinery, turning 3 sharp raps that meant they'd made it official. Gerald Hayes stood on my porch, a professional process server in his 50s, with the neutral expression of someone who delivered thousands of difficult documents. He handed me a thick manila envelope with practiced sympathy that meant nothing. "Guardianship petition," he said. "You're legally served. Hearing date is October 23rd at Charleston County Probate Court, 9 a.m. Behind me, Simone appeared from the dining room, Brent close behind. They'd been waiting for this moment. "Thank you, Mr. Hayes," Simone said, her voice professionally cordial. "We appreciate your promptness." The process server left. I stood holding the envelope, its weight somehow heavier than paper should be. "Open it," Simone said, not a suggestion. I tore the seal. The petition was 43 pages professionally, bound dense with legal terminology and clinical language. The petitioners, Leland Chambers and Brent concerned family members seeking emergency guardianship due to severe cognitive impairment of Leland Chambers, 68, retired maritime surveyor. The supporting documentation started on page 12, medical assessments from 3 physicians. Dr. William Hendricks, M.D., geriatric psychiatry. Patient exhibits significant memory deficits, confusion regarding recent events, difficulty managing financial affairs. Preliminary assessment indicates moderate cognitive decline consistent with early-stage dementia. Recommend immediate supervised care. Dr. Elena Valdez, M.D. Neurology. Neurological examination reveals concerning patterns of memory loss, impaired judgment, and difficulty with complex tasks. Patient appears unaware of deficits. Guardian appointment recommended for safety and asset protection. Dr. Richard Morrison, M.D., geriatric medicine. Physical examination shows patient in declining health, with noted confusion during evaluation. Unable to accurately recall medications, medical history, or recent events. Patient requires 24-hour supervision to prevent self-harm or exploitation by predatory third parties. I'd never met any of these doctors, never sat for evaluations, never provided medical history. Every assessment was fabricated. The petition is comprehensive. Leland, Simone said, moving to stand beside where I'd remained frozen in the entryway. 3 independent medical evaluations, photographic evidence, witness statements. The court will grant emergency guardianship Monday. I never saw these doctors. My voice came out steady despite the rage building behind my ribs. These assessments are fabricated. Your memory issues are exactly why guardianship is necessary. You don't remember the appointments. She said it with such smooth confidence that I understood she'd anticipated this defense. Every protest I made would be cited as proof of the confusion they'd invented. The petition continued photographs of my living room, showing dishes in the sink, papers scattered on surfaces, general disorder. All staged, all photographed during the week they'd been living here, all captioned, with clinical observations about inability to maintain living space. Witness statements followed, neighbors claiming I'd seemed confused during interactions, stories I didn't recognize about wandering outside at odd hours, accounts of forgetting conversations that never happened. Lies built on lies, each one plausible enough to convince a judge who'd never met me. I documented ship collisions where captains made fatal errors because they misread the opponent's trajectory. Simone thought I'd surrendered. She was about to learn I'd only taken defensive positions. "Dad, just accept this," Brent said quietly, and something in his voice suggested discomfort he was working hard to suppress. "We'll take care of everything. You won't have to worry about anything anymore." I read through the petition, slowly letting my hands tremble slightly as I turned pages. Let them see the tremor. Let them think it was fear or age when it was fury barely contained. When I finished, I set the papers down on the entry table with careful precision and walked to my chair in the living room. Sank into it, put my head in my hands. The performance of defeat. Simone and Brent exchanged glances I saw through my fingers. Victory in their eyes, relief in his shoulders. They'd won. "I'm tired," I said, letting my voice crack. "Just very tired." Why don't you rest, Leland? Simone's voice carried false gentleness. We'll handle everything from here. You don't need to understand the details anymore. She turned to Brent, her tone shifting to business. Property appraiser comes Tuesday, the day after guardianship is granted. I've confirmed with Baxter Assessment Group. Buyers ready to close by month's end with cash. Everything's on schedule. What about the other thing? Brent's voice dropped. The life insurance beneficiary change gets filed Wednesday soon as the guardianship certificate is registered. Then we just wait for nature to take its course. Elderly fall accidents are remarkably common. They were discussing my murder in my living room while I sat 10 feet away, head in hands, apparently too broken to comprehend. Let them think I'm broken, I thought behind my hands. Let them believe they've won. Because Olivia's recordings were with Lawrence as of last night. The Polaroid evidence of my injuries sat in waterproof sleeves, hidden where they'd never look. Rossi had already responded. Adult Protective Services had been alerted Wednesday morning. Lawrence was compiling background on Simone that would reveal patterns she thought she'd left behind. They saw a broken old man in his chair. They didn't see the maritime investigator who'd just finished setting multiple traps, each one legal, each one baited with their own arrogance. I'm going to lie down, I said, standing slowly hunched like I'd aged a decade overnight. That's good, Dad, Brent said. Rest. Everything will be easier after Monday. I shuffled toward my bedroom, maintaining the defeated posture, keeping my shoulders curved and my steps uncertain. The cameras tracked me. I gave them exactly what they expected to see, but in my mind I was counting. 5 days until the hearing Monday morning. 4 days until Lawrence's compiled evidence package hit the Attorney General's office Friday afternoon. 3 days until Adult Protective Services executed emergency intervention Saturday morning based on Olivia's recordings. 2 days until Victor Rossi's federal fraud investigation officially opened based on cross-jurisdictional pattern evidence. 1 day until everything Simone had built started collapsing. I lay on my bed staring at the ceiling and let the cameras see an old man broken by legal machinery too powerful to fight. They couldn't see me calculating exactly how 40 years of maritime investigation expertise was about to dismantle their entire conspiracy. The first intervention launched Friday morning. Adult Protective Services received Lawrence's emergency petition with attached evidence at 9 a.m. The second FBI field office in Charleston opened preliminary inquiry into interstate financial exploitation at 11 a.m. The third would be Monday's guardianship hearing where everything Simone had built would detonate. But first I needed to understand exactly what I was fighting. Friday afternoon, while Brent and Simone believed I was napping in my bedroom, defeated broken. No threat, I slipped through the gap in the fence boards where Constance had loosened 3 planks. Through her back door, into a dining room full of evidence that proved I wasn't paranoid. I was being hunted. Lawrence Thornton sat at Constance's table with file folders spread like an autopsy report. His face carried the grim expression of someone who'd discovered something worse than expected. 2 previous cases, he said, without preamble. Howard Brennan, Georgia, 2019. Samuel Whitmore, Florida, 2022. Both elderly, both widowed, both maritime professionals. He slid photographs across the table. 2 men who could have been my brothers, silver-haired, weathered faces, the bearing of people who'd spent careers around ships and water. Brennan was 72, retired harbor master in Savannah. Lawrence continued. Guardianship petition filed by woman named Simone Duval, your daughter's maiden name. Granted after psychiatric evaluation showed cognitive decline. 3 months later, Brennan died from injuries sustained in a staircase fall at his home. The photograph showed a pleasant house with a long staircase. Fatal if you fell, or were pushed. Whitmore was 69, former marine surveyor in Tampa. Guardianship petition filed by woman named Simone Rousseau, married name from a brief marriage your daughter never mentioned. Granted after medical assessments documented confusion and safety risks. 5 months later, Whitmore died from medication error. Wrong dosage of heart medication administered by his guardian. 2 men, 2 maritime careers, 2 widowers, 2 guardianships, 2 deaths within 6 months, 2 closed investigations, 1 woman connecting them all. She's done this before, I said, and my voice sounded distant. Twice. That we know of, Lawrence said. FBI is checking national databases for similar patterns under other names she might have used, but the maritime connection creates federal jurisdiction interstate commerce angle. That's why they moved so fast when I presented Olivia's recording and the pattern evidence. Constance sat across from me, her hospice nurse's composure cracked by horror. Those men's families? She said quietly. Did they suspect? Both families filed complaints with local authorities, Lawrence said. Both cases closed as accidental deaths. Brennan's daughter insisted it was murder, but with legal guardianship in place, the guardian's statement carried more weight than the estranged daughter's suspicions. Whitmore's son hired a private investigator who found inconsistencies but couldn't prove anything. Until now, no one connected the cases. He pulled out banking records, transaction histories, legal filings. The methodology is identical across all three cases. Target widowed maritime professionals with substantial assets. Establish relationship, girlfriend, caregiver, concerned friend. Move in or gain frequent access. Isolate the victim from family. Secure power of attorney through deception. File guardianship petition with fabricated medical evidence. Once granted, liquidate assets quickly. Then, he didn't finish. He didn't need to. Then wait for the accident. I finished. Lawrence met my eyes. Your life insurance policy. How much? 500,000. Why? Because that's the pattern. She doesn't want guardianship to control you. She wants it to kill you legally. He spread more documents, actuarial tables, asset calculations, financial projections. Living Leland under guardianship generates property liquidation, maybe 400,000 after court fees and sale costs, plus controlled spending from your liquid assets. But dead Leland generates 500,000 in life insurance, 650,000 from property sale, 420,000 in remaining liquid assets. Total 1.57 million. Clean, fast, and with guardianship in place, completely legal. The mathematics were clinical, brutal, precise. Brennan and Whitmore, I said. Their life insurance? Brennan's policy was 350,000. Whitmore's was 600,000. Both paid out to the guardian within 90 days of death. No investigations because guardianship was legitimate deaths were ruled accidental, and the legal system saw a devoted caregiver collecting benefits she was entitled to as guardian. I'd spent 40 years investigating casualties. Now I was looking at casualty reports, where I was scheduled to be the wreckage. She's not just a thief, Constance said, her voice shaking. She's a serial killer using the legal system as her weapon. Yes. Lawrence's word dropped like a verdict. And Olivia's recording gives us proof of intent. Simone discussing timeline optimization and elderly fall accidents, 2 days before formal guardianship petition. Combined with the pattern evidence from Brennan and Whitmore, we have conspiracy to commit murder. He slid one final document across the table. Adult Protective Services emergency petition filed this morning. Investigator assigned Sharon Vega, 15 years experience with elder abuse cases. She'll attempt contact tomorrow, Saturday. The hearing is still Monday because we can't stop that without tipping our hand too early. Then he placed another document on top, this one bearing federal letterhead. FBI memo issued 11 this morning. Interstate fraud investigation opened into Simone Duval-Rousseau Chambers. Special Agent Victor Rossi, assigned Maritime Fraud Division. The name hit me like electricity. Victor Rossi, the investigator from my old case files. You contacted him. He contacted me after Constance reached out Wednesday. He remembered you. More importantly, he remembered Simone from a tangential inquiry. In 2020, she was peripherally connected to a shipping insurance fraud case that went nowhere. When I showed him the pattern, he escalated immediately. Federal agents arrived Tuesday morning to execute search warrants and interview witnesses. The room held silence, broken only by the kitchen clock ticking. The hearing is Monday, Lawrence said carefully. Federal agents arrive Tuesday. Adult Protective Services investigates tomorrow. We're closing the trap from 3 directions. But that means we have to keep me alive through the weekend. I finished. Because Simone was smart, methodical. If she sensed the walls closing, if she realized her pattern had been discovered, she might accelerate her timeline. She might decide elderly, fall accidents could happen before Monday's hearing, just as easily as after. Surviving the weekend required more than hiding. It required a fence disguised as surrender. Saturday morning we gathered like conspirators planning a heist. Except we were the ones being robbed, and our only weapon was making the thieves steal poisoned bait. Lawrence spread fresh documents across Constance's dining table. these ones crisp and official-looking, bearing letterhead from Thornton Legal Services, and notary stamps that appeared legitimate to anyone who wasn't an attorney. Fake expedited property transfer authorization, he said, tapping the top page. Designed to look like emergency paperwork your previous attorney filed before the guardianship petition. It offers exactly what Simone wants: immediate sale clearance, bypassing probate, quick close option at $550,000 to an unnamed buyer. I studied the documents. They looked flawless. Why would she take the bait when she already has Monday's hearing? I asked. Because predators get greedy. This offers her the house immediately instead of waiting weeks for court proceedings after guardianship is granted. Plus, it looks like you're too confused to understand what you're signing, which fits her narrative perfectly. Lawrence pointed to a clause buried on page 3. Here's the tripwire emergency waiver provision requires witness signature from non-interested party, with notarized verification within 24 hours of execution. She can't use these documents without a witness signature. Since you're supposedly incompetent, and she's the interested party, she'll need to forge one. That's federal wire fraud the moment she tries to process it through the banking system. But how do we get her to find them without being suspicious? Constance asked. We use her surveillance cameras against her, I said, understanding, crystallizing. I stage discovering them, then leave them where the cameras can see me reading them. She monitors everything I do. She'll search my office the first chance she gets. 40 years investigating ship disasters taught me this. The best evidence isn't what you find at the scene. It's what you ensure the guilty party touches with their own hands. Lawrence pulled out additional papers. Bank alerts, fraud notifications, law enforcement contacts. Oh, I've pre-alerted Low Country Credit Union Fraud Department. These documents have serial numbers registered as test instruments for a fraud prevention seminar. If anyone attempts to process them, it triggers automatic notification to me, the bank's security office, and local law enforcement. She won't just commit fraud, she'll commit documented traceable fraud, with multiple witnesses notified in real time. What if she just destroys the documents instead of using them? Constance asked. Then we still have everything else, Lawrence said. Olivia's recordings, the pattern evidence from Brennan and Whitmore Adult Protective Services investigation, launching Monday morning. But if she takes this bait, we add federal wire fraud and forgery to conspiracy charges. More importantly, it proves intent she's willing to commit additional crimes, even with guardianship seemingly secured. The psychology was elegant. Simone had spent weeks positioning herself as the legitimate guardian, protecting a confused old man. These documents would tempt her to break character, to rush the timeline, to get greedy. Greed made predators careless. When do I plant them? I asked. Lawrence checked his watch. They left 30 minutes ago. Brent's car headed toward Charleston. Probably lunch and errands. You have maybe 2 hours before they return. I took the documents, feeling their weight. 40 years of professional training had prepared me for this moment, salting evidence, creating traps, documenting fraud. I just never expected to do it in my own home against my own daughter. An hour later, I slipped back through Constance's fence into my yard, entering through the back door like I'd only been outside getting air. The cameras tracked me shuffling toward my office, shoulders hunched, defeated old man taking up space in his own home. In the office, I made a show of searching through files, muttering to myself about lost papers and confusion. The camera in the corner captured every movement. Good. I placed Lawrence's fake documents in my filing cabinet drawer, the ones Simone had already searched twice that I knew about. Filed them under urgent attorney materials in crisp manila folders that screamed importance. Then I pulled them back out, sat at my desk and read through them with visible confusion. Property sale, expedited authorization, $550,000, I said aloud, just loud enough for audio pickup. I don't understand any of this anymore. Why would Lawrence file this? Perfect performance. Confused grandfather overwhelmed by legal terminology documents, too complex for his failing mind. I returned the papers to the cabinet, closed the drawer, but not completely. Left it 3 inches open. Not suspicious. Just old man carelessness. The kind of mistake someone monitoring cameras would notice immediately. The trap was set. The bait was positioned. Now I just had to survive long enough to see her take it. I shuffled back to the living room and settled into my chair with a book I wasn't reading, maintaining the defeated posture, playing the role they expected. 2 hours later, I heard the BMW in the driveway, Simone's voice in the kitchen sharp and businesslike on her phone, then silence as she ended the call. 10 minutes passed. I turned pages without reading, listening. Simone's distinctive footsteps, deliberate, purposeful, moved down the hallway toward my office. I kept my eyes on my book, breathing steady, appearing half asleep in my chair. The office door, which I'd left ajar, opened wider. Through the narrow gap between door and frame, I watched her reflection in the window glass. She went straight to the filing cabinet, pulled open the drawer I'd left partially open, found the folders immediately, of course she did. She'd been searching my files for weeks, pulled out her phone, started photographing. Every page, every clause, every serial number that would later prove these were fraudulent test documents. She was meticulous, I'd give her that. Photographed each page twice, ensuring clarity. Then carefully returned the documents, exactly as I'd positioned them, closed the drawer to the same 3-inch gap, and left the office without a sound. Her footsteps retreated down the hallway. I heard her voice in the guest wing, muffled but urgent, calling someone, probably Brent, probably saying she'd found exactly what they needed. I sat in my chair book, forgotten in my lap, and counted my heartbeats until they steadied. She'd taken the bait. Now we'd discover just how desperate her greed really was. She acted faster than Lawrence predicted. Desperation accelerates timelines. Sunday, 2 a.m. Their voices through the bedroom floor weren't just angry anymore. They were desperate in a way that meant someone dangerous was coming. I woke to Brent's voice carrying through the floorboards above my bedroom, the guest wing they'd claimed as their territory. Loud enough to penetrate plaster and wood, which meant the argument had been building for hours. They said Tuesday, or they break my legs. Simone? His voice cracked with panic I'd never heard before. The hearing doesn't help if I'm in a hospital bed by Wednesday. Lower your voice. Simone's tone stayed cold, controlled. He's sleeping. The cameras show him in bed since 10. I don't care about the cameras. I owe $180,000 to people who don't take excuses. The deadline is Tuesday morning. $180,000. Gambling debts finally confirmed. Not just greed driving Brent's cooperation with Simone's scheme survival. He was cornered by violent creditors the same way I was cornered by fraudulent guardianship. Except I'd chosen my corner deliberately. He'd gambled his way into his. Then we used those transfer documents I found in his files. Simone said, her voice shifting to calculation. Emergency property authorization. I called the buyer Saturday night. They can close Monday morning before the hearing. We get $550,000 cash immediately. You're sure the documents are legitimate? They're on his attorney's letterhead with notary seals. He's too confused to remember authorizing them. It's perfect proofs he can't manage his affairs while giving us exactly what we need. I lay motionless in my bed below them, listening to my daughter plan to commit federal fraud, using documents I'd deliberately planted for exactly this purpose. The trap I'd set just became more dangerous, because Brent wasn't just greedy anymore, he was terrified. Terrified men made desperate choices. What about him? Brent asked, and his voice dropped. After we have the money, he'll still be here, still able to contest things. Silence. Long enough that I stopped breathing to hear better. Elderly fall accidents are statistically common, Simone said finally. We discussed this. That was theoretical. Now I'm talking about timeline management. Once we have the cash Monday and you pay off those animals Tuesday, we're clear. But he can't be around to complicate things. Nature takes its course. Sunday night, the medical examiner sees an elderly man who fell in his own home, and by the time anyone questions anything, we're long gone. Sunday night, tonight, 12 hours from now. For a moment, hearing his genuine terror about gambling debts, I almost felt pity. Then I remembered his hands shoving me to the floor, and the pity evaporated like morning fog off the harbor. The argument continued above me, but I'd heard enough. I lay still until their footsteps retreated, until I heard the guest wing door close, until silence settled, except for my own heartbeat counting the hours I had left. 16 hours later, Sunday afternoon, light slanted through my office window while I sat in the living room chair pretending to sleep. Simone moved through the house with purpose, her phone pressed to her ear, professional voice engaged. Low Country Credit Union Fraud Prevention Department. Yes, I need to speak with someone about an emergency property sale authorization. My blood went cold. Fraud Prevention Department. Lawrence had said he'd alerted them that they'd play along, but hearing her actually execute the trap was different from planning it. "This is Simone Chambers calling on behalf of client Leland Chambers. We have emergency property transfer authorization requiring immediate closing. Monday 9 a.m. if possible." Before I reveal what the bank representative said next, are you still with me? Comment A, if you think Simone suspects it's a trap, or B, if you believe she's completely fooled, and add one short reason so I can see how you're reading this. A quick note. The next part includes some fictionalized details, added to deepen the emotional impact and convey the core lesson. What matters is the story's message. The voice on the other end spoke too quietly for me to hear, but Simone's responses told me everything. Yes, I have power of attorney. Client is elderly under imminent guardianship proceedings. Time sensitive due to creditor situations. Pause. Documentation includes notarized transfer authorization, POA certificate property, deed verification. All originals available for review. Pause. Longer this time. 9 a.m. Monday works perfectly. Wire transfer acceptable? Yes. Total purchase price $550,000 cash buyer already secured. Thank you. She hung up, exhaled. I watched through barely cracked eyelids as she pressed both hands to her face, shoulders dropping with relief. She believed she'd solved everything. The bank appointment would save Brent from broken legs, clear their debts, fund their escape. She thought salvation was 18 hours away. She didn't know Lawrence had set up that exact scenario fraud department, playing along scheduling an appointment where FBI agents and Adult Protective Services would be waiting instead of a property officer. She'd taken the bait. She'd swallowed the hook. Now all that remained was reeling her in. Except she'd also just confirmed their timeline: Sunday night accident, Monday morning property fraud, Tuesday debt payment, then disappearance. I had maybe 12 hours to survive. Simone made 3 more calls that afternoon. First to Brent, voice bright with false confidence. "It's handled. Monday morning, we close Tuesday, you pay them Wednesday, we're in Florida." Second to someone about travel arrangements, one-way flights to Tampa. Third to her buyer contact confirming wire transfer logistics. Every call documented her intent, her timeline, her conspiracy. Every word would be evidence when the trap sprung Monday morning. If I survived until Monday morning, 6 p.m. My phone buzzed with a text. I checked it while Simone was in the kitchen, keeping the screen angled away from cameras. "Lawrence, bank confirmed appointment. FBI and APS will be waiting. Hearing tomorrow becomes formality." Relief flooded through me. The trap was set. Tomorrow morning she'd walk into handcuffs instead of a closing. Then a second text arrived. "Constance says Olivia just showed up at her door with a packed bag, terrified. Says her mother mentioned something about accidents happening Sunday night. Get to Constance's immediately." My hands went numb. Olivia had been living with Simone, had overheard the same conversation I had, or worse, and she'd run. Which meant Simone knew someone had been listening, knew her timeline was compromised, which meant the Sunday night accident might not wait until midnight. It might happen in the next hour. I didn't sleep Sunday night, couldn't, just listened for footsteps that never came, for the creak of stairs that would signal my daughter finally attempting what she'd planned. But Lawrence had moved first. Monday morning, light through my window felt like resurrection. Lawrence and Constance had kept me alive through Sunday night's danger, and now Simone and Brent had no idea they were about to walk into their own ending. The text from Lawrence had come at midnight Sunday. "Victor Rossi parked outside your house with Beaufort County deputy. Marked patrol car visible from every window. They won't try anything with law enforcement present. Sleep if you can. Tomorrow, we finish this." Victor Rossi, the maritime fraud investigator I'd worked with 26 years ago, whose business card I'd found in my old files, who'd recognized Simone's pattern from a tangential case in 2020. He'd become my guardian, sitting outside through the dangerous hours. The marked patrol car's presence had worked exactly as Lawrence predicted. Through my bedroom window at 3 a.m., I'd watch Brent peer through the curtains at the street, then retreat. Heard urgent whispered conversation upstairs. Heard plans change. They'd decided to wait. To focus on Monday morning's bank appointment instead. To get the money first deal with me later. Except there would be no later. 6 a.m. Monday. I heard them wake. Heard showers running. Heard purposeful movement. Heard Simone's voice sharp with instructions as they prepared for what they believed would be their salvation. I made coffee in the kitchen, playing the role of defeated old man, going through morning routines, because what else was there to do? Simone appeared at 7 dressed in professional attire, navy suit, minimal jewelry, the costume of a legitimate real estate title, examiner handling important business. "We're handling some property paperwork this morning," she said, voice dripping false concern. "You just rest. Everything will be taken care of soon." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Never had I realized. 40 years I'd known this woman I'd raised, and I'd never seen genuine warmth reach her eyes. "The bank appointment is at 9, Brent said from the hallway, checking his watch. He looked terrible, exhausted, wired, the face of someone running on adrenaline and terror. "We sign the authorization, wire transfer hits by 10, I pay my people by noon. Everything's back on track." "What about Dad?" He glanced at me, something almost like guilt flickering across his face. "What about the hearing this afternoon?" "Once the money's secured, the hearing is just formality," Simone said. "We already control everything that matters." They didn't know Victor Rossi had documented their Sunday night surveillance avoidance as consciousness of guilt. Didn't know Lawrence had compiled 3 weeks of evidence into a prosecution package. Didn't know FBI Special Agent Victor Rossi had coordinated with Adult Protective Services investigator Sharon Vega to be waiting at Low Country Credit Union. They thought they controlled everything. In maritime salvage, they call it the final cable, the last line securing the wreck before you raise it to the surface. This was our final cable. Everything depended on Simone and Brent following their greed straight into the trap. 8:30. Simone gathered her materials leather folder containing the fake documents, her phone with photographs of every page, a pen that probably cost more than I spent on groceries in a month. Professional predator, ready for the kill. I watched from my chair as she checked the folder contents one final time. Saw her lips move slightly as she reviewed verifying signatures, confirming page order, ensuring every detail appeared perfect. Including, I realized, the witness signatures she must have forged overnight, the emergency waiver clause requiring non-interested party verification. She'd solved that problem the same way she'd solved every other obstacle fraud. She'd just accelerated her charges from conspiracy to active federal wire fraud. "We'll be back by 11, she said, approaching where I sat. Bent down, kissed my forehead with theatrical affection for anyone monitoring cameras. "Don't worry about anything, Leland. We're taking care of everything." Brent lingered at the door, keys in hand conflict written across his face. "Dad, he started." Simone cut him off. "We're late. Let's go." He followed her. Of course he did. Gambling debts and violent creditors had stripped away whatever conscience might have stopped him weeks ago. I listened to the door close, heard their footsteps on the porch, heard the BMW start its engine purring with German precision as it carried 2 people toward their own arrest. 40 years investigating maritime fraud taught me this truth: the moment before impact feels longest. They had 60 minutes of freedom remaining. I'd spent 3 weeks ensuring minute 61 would be handcuffs. Their car turned the corner toward the credit union, toward Lawrence, toward the FBI, toward the end of everything they'd planned. My phone buzzed. "Lawrence, they just parked." FBI agents in position inside bank manager's office. A PS investigator recording from security room. Local police backup in unmarked vehicles. "Do you want to be here when it happens?" I looked up. Constance stood in my kitchen doorway. She'd crossed through the hedge gap to stay with me during these final hours. "Go," she said softly. "You've earned the right to see this." I typed my response. Yes, I need to see her face when she realizes. "Lawrence, Victor's outside your house in the gray sedan. He'll drive you here. Park 1 block over. You'll watch from his vehicle with binoculars. Safe distance. Professional documentation." Victor Rossi's car was already pulling into my driveway. I stood, leaving behind the defeated posture I'd maintained for weeks. Constance handed me my jacket, the one I'd worn on my last day at Hartwell and Associates. 3 years ago, back when I was a maritime surveyor, investigating other people's disasters. Now I was investigating my own, and the investigation was about to conclude. "Be careful," Constance said. "They're the ones who should have been careful," I replied. Victor Rossi opened his passenger door as I approached. 58 years old, silver-haired, carrying the same sharp-eyed competence I remembered from 1998. "Leland," he said, "let's go watch your daughter commit federal fraud." We drove toward Low Country Credit Union, toward 3 weeks of carefully constructed justice, toward the 60-minute countdown that would end with my daughter in handcuffs and my life returned to me. The trap was closing, and for the first time in months, I was the one watching it spring instead of caught inside it. Victor parked 1 block from Low Country Credit Union. 9 a.m. Monday morning, the building looked ordinary. Brick facade, glass doors, the institutional architecture of trust and money. Inside, federal agents waited to arrest my daughter for fraud. But I wasn't watching from the car. Lawrence met us at the service entrance, guiding me through back hallways to the bank manager's office. From there, watching security monitors with Lawrence beside me, I had the best seat in the house to witness Simone and Brent commit federal fraud in high definition. 4 camera angles, Lawrence said, pointing to screens showing the main floor. FBI recording from the security office. A PS investigator, Sharon Vega, documenting from conference room. Everything admissible in court. I stared at the monitors, seeing the empty lobby, the teller stations, the accounts desk, where Patricia Holbrook, a senior accounts manager in her 40s, who'd worked with Lawrence for 15 years, sat reviewing paperwork with Academy Award-level calm. She knew what was coming, had been briefed Saturday night, would play her role perfectly while documenting every federal crime. "They're here," Victor said from his position by the window. Black BMW just pulled into parking lot. My chest tightened. 3 weeks of planning compressed into the next 30 minutes. On the monitors, the main entrance doors opened. Simone entered first. She'd dressed for the Roll Navy suit, leather portfolio, minimal jewelry. Professional real estate title examiner handling legitimate business. Her hair was pulled back severely, her expression composed with the confidence of someone who'd done this before, because she had. Howard Brennan in Georgia, Samuel Whitmore in Florida, both elderly maritime professionals, both dead within 6 months of guardianship. Brent followed 3 steps behind, looking like a man walking toward his execution and knowing it. His tie was crooked, his hands stayed in his pockets. They crossed the lobby to Patricia's desk. Simone's smile engaged like a switch. "Good morning," Simone's voice came through the speakers. "We have a 9 o'clock appointment regarding emergency property authorization." Patricia looked up with professional courtesy. "Of course. Please have a seat. You're here regarding the Leland Chambers estate matter." "Property liquidation under guardianship petition," Simone corrected smoothly. She opened her portfolio, pulling out the fake documents Lawrence had created. All documentation, including power of attorney court filing verification and expedited transfer authorization. Wire transfer to escrow, account $550,000, to be processed by 10 a.m. today. Patricia accepted the documents, studying them with appropriate attention. I watched her fingers trace the forged signatures. My signature, witness signatures, Simone had fabricated overnight. Notary stamps that appeared legitimate to anyone who wasn't looking for fraud. "I see," Patricia said. "Let me verify these filing numbers and signature authentications. 1 moment, please." Her fingers moved across her keyboard, typing codes that triggered silent alerts to FBI agents positioned throughout the building. Simone leaned back, crossing her legs. Perfect picture of patient professionalism. Brent shifted in his chair, checked his phone sweat visible on his forehead despite the air conditioning. "The signatures appear in order," Patricia said, "but I'll need manager approval for wire transfers exceeding $500,000. Mr. Reynolds handles those personally. Let me get him." She stood, disappeared toward the back offices. On the monitor, I watched Simone's hand tighten on her portfolio. Watched her scan the lobby, counting exits, assessing security cameras she thought were routine when they were actually documenting her federal crimes. Watching my daughter destroy herself while Brent sat beside her, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not triumph, but the hollow ache of a father witnessing his child's final mistake. "Manager approaching," Victor said beside me. On screen, a man in his 50s emerged, actual bank manager, briefed by FBI, playing his part in the choreographed trap. "Ms. Chambers, I'm David Reynolds, branch manager. I understand you're requesting expedited wire transfer for estate liquidation." Simone stood, shaking his hand with professional warmth. "Yes, all documentation is complete. We're on a timeline due to creditor obligations. Of course, let me review these materials." He sat at Patricia's desk, spreading the fake documents, examining each page with methodical attention. Power of attorney dated September 7th. Guardianship petition filed October 10th. Emergency authorization signed October 21st. Each date he spoke aloud became recorded evidence. Everything appears in order, he continued. However, for wire transfers exceeding 500,000 federal banking regulations, requires secondary authorization and property title verification. Standard protocol. Should only take about 15 minutes. Simone's professional mask held, barely. We scheduled this appointment. All documentation is complete. There shouldn't be delays. Just standard verification, Miss Chambers. I'm sure you understand fraud prevention protocols. The word fraud hung in the air like gun smoke. Brent leaned forward. Simone, something feels wrong. Maybe we should. We're not leaving without the transfer authorization. She cut him off, voice still controlled but sharpening. On the monitors, I saw what she couldn't. From her angle, two men in dark suits positioning themselves near the exits. FBI special agents' badges concealed under jackets, hands resting casually near weapons. Mr. Reynolds continued his deliberate stalling. Let me just verify the property deed numbers against county records, and I'll need to see identification, again standard procedure, for amounts this substantial. Simone's jaw tightened. She produced her driver's license. And you, sir, Reynolds addressed Brent. I'm her fiancé. I'm not on the documents. But you're present during the transaction, so for our records, Brent handed over his license, hands shaking. Reynolds typed slowly, deliberately, each keystroke another 30 seconds of delay, giving FBI time to position, to verify, to prepare. Simone's eyes swept the lobby again. This time they stopped on the two men in suits. One was speaking quietly into a radio. The other watched her with professional intensity. That meant cop, meant federal agent, meant threat. Her body language shifted. Shoulders tensed. Hand moved to check her phone, but stopped halfway, calculating, realizing. How much longer? She asked, and the Polish was cracking now. Just a few more minutes, Miss Chambers. These verifications are... Her eyes found mine. Not literally, she couldn't see into the manager's office from the lobby. But on the security feed, she was staring directly at the camera, and for a frozen second it felt like she was looking straight through the monitor, into my soul. And she knew. Her hand moved toward her purse, not for documents, but for car keys preparing to bolt. The bank manager's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then at her, then nodded almost imperceptibly toward the two men by the exits. They moved forward. Badges came out held high. FBI, Ms. Chambers, Mr. Culver, please remain seated. The badges came out, first FBI polished metal, catching the fluorescent lights, and I stepped through the manager's office door into the lobby. Simone's head snapped toward me. The color drained from her face like I was seeing a ghost. In a way, I suppose I was the ghost of the helpless old man she thought she'd broken. Hello, Simone, I said. Brent? The taller FBI agent, mid-40s, graying at the temples, carrying himself with the authority of someone who'd done this 1,000 times, stepped forward with his badge held high. Special Agent Daniel Foster, Federal Bureau of Investigation. Simone Chambers and Brent Culver, you're both under investigation for attempted wire fraud, forgery of legal documents, and conspiracy to commit elder financial exploitation. Simone stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing without sound. Brent had gone pale, his hand gripping the armrest of his chair. That Simone finally managed. You're supposed to be. Helpless, confused. I walked across the marble floor, each footstep echoing in the suddenly silent lobby. Bank tellers had stopped mid-transaction. Customers stood frozen, pretending not to stare, while watching everything. That's what you needed me to be, what you manufactured me to be. But I've been documenting everything since the day you moved into my house. I don't understand, she said, and for a moment she sounded like the daughter I'd raised. Lost, uncertain. Then her eyes hardened. This is a setup. Those documents came from your attorney files. You signed them. The bank verified serial numbers registered as test instruments for fraud investigation, Lawrence said, appearing beside me. Every page you photographed, every signature you forged, every false statement you made to Patricia here, all documented and recorded from multiple angles. The second FBI agent, a woman in her 30s with sharp eyes, pulled a recorder from her jacket. Special Agent Jennifer Blake, she said. Ms. Chambers, we also have audio recordings from your residence documenting conspiracy discussions. October 18th, you and Mr. Culver discussed timeline optimization for obtaining life insurance payouts following elderly fall accidents. Would you like to hear that recording? Simone's professional mask shattered. You bugged my house. That's illegal. Your granddaughter, Olivia, recorded you, I said quietly. She's been documenting your conversations for 3 weeks because she knew something was wrong. A 15-year-old girl had more integrity than her own mother. That hit her. I watched her flinch, watched something crack behind her eyes. I was 8 years old when Dad taught me to tie nautical knots. I said memory flashing, unbidden Simone on the dock at Charleston Harbor. Pigtails and gap-toothed smiles, small hands working rope while I guided them. You said you wanted to be just like me, a maritime surveyor investigating ships. I taught you how to look for damage, how to document evidence, how truth always matters more than convenience. I pulled a folder from Lawrence's briefcase, the real evidence, not the fake documents she'd tried to use. 40 years as a maritime surveyor teaches you how to document fraud, I said, handing it to Agent Foster. This folder contains dated photographs of injuries sustained during your boyfriend's assault, audio recordings from hidden devices, forensic timeline analysis, witness statements from Constance Whitley, who observed the September 15th attack, bank records showing unauthorized account restrictions, and pattern evidence linking you to 2 previous victims, Howard Brennan in Georgia, Samuel Whitmore in Florida. The little girl who'd once beamed with pride on that dock was gone. The woman standing before me now wore her face like a mask. Agent Foster opened the folder, scanning pages organized with tabs and labels. This is extremely thorough, Mr. Chambers. Professional grade investigation documentation. Section 1, financial manipulation, I said. Section 2, forged documents, including the fake medical assessments from doctors I never saw. Section 3, attempted property theft and conspiracy to commit murder for insurance fraud. Murder. Brent surged to his feet. This was all Simone's idea. She said her father wanted help managing his affairs. She said he was confused and needed family support. I didn't know about Georgia or Florida or any previous... Shut up, Simone hissed. She has gambling debts from her first marriage, the medical billing startup that failed. She said your property sale would clear everything and we could start over. Brent stopped talking, Simone said, her voice rising, but he couldn't stop. Terror broke through his control. I have a gambling problem. Yes, but I didn't want this. I didn't want to hurt anyone. She said you'd never know. Said you were too far gone to understand anyway. Dad, please! Simone cut him off, turning to me. Her professional mask was gone, replaced with raw desperation. I can explain. I was desperate. The debt Marcus wouldn't help Olivia's school costs. You stole Olivia's college fund, I said. $47,000 your daughter saved from birthdays and part-time jobs. You told Marcus you were using it to pay for my care facility, deposit making him feel guilty for not helping more. But there was no care facility, just Brent's bookies and your failed businesses. Her face crumpled. You chose this, Simone, I said, and my voice cracked, despite every effort to keep it steady. You chose him over your own father. You chose theft over asking for help. I would have helped you. I would have given you anything if you'd just asked honestly. The bank lobby had gone completely silent. Even the ambient hum of fluorescent lights seemed to pause. Bank tellers stood frozen. Customers pretended not to watch while recording on phones. The electronic beep of the security door unlocking echoed as uniformed police officers entered to assist with the arrest. Lawrence's hand settled on my shoulder. You did the right thing, but watching FBI agents guide my daughter toward the exit, watching her turn back one last time with tears streaming down her face, I felt only the hollow ache of a father who'd won the battle and lost his child. Agent Blake handed me a card. We'll need you to come to the field office this afternoon for a formal statement. 3 p.m. I nodded, unable to speak. They led Simone and Brent out through glass doors into brilliant morning sunlight. I watched the FBI sedan pull away, watched my daughter disappear behind tinted windows, watched the end of everything we'd been. Lawrence handed me an envelope. This came to my office this morning, from your son Marcus. He says he needs to talk to you immediately, something about Olivia's college fund. Apparently that money didn't go where Simone said it went. I stared at the envelope, exhaustion settling into my bones. There's more, I asked. Lawrence's envelope contained a single page, Marcus's handwriting, urgent and messy. The letter from Marcus trembled in my hands. Not from weakness, but from rage I'd thought was already spent. Dad, it began. I just found out what Simone really did with Olivia's college fund. She told me she borrowed it to pay for your memory care facility deposit, $47,000 that you desperately needed. I felt so guilty for not being there, for not helping more. I even gave her another $10,000 because she said you needed additional funds for the move. There was no facility. There was no deposit. I tracked the money to Brent's bookie. All of it. Olivia's entire college savings gone to gambling debts. Simone weaponized my guilt to steal from her own daughter. I'm coming to you as soon as I get this message. I have bank records. Text everything. I'll testify. I'm so sorry I didn't see it sooner. I looked at Lawrence. She made him think she was helping me. She didn't just steal from me and Olivia. She made Marcus an unwitting accomplice. He wants to testify, Lawrence said. Called my office this morning. Said he's bringing documentation showing the full transaction trail. She stole from her own daughter and made her brother complicit in the process. The calculation of it was staggering. Not just theft, emotional manipulation layered on top of financial fraud. A car pulled into the credit union lot, Marcus's Honda driving too fast tires, squealing slightly as he parked. My son emerged looking like he hadn't slept in days, rumpled clothes, hollow eyes, the face of someone who discovered a truth that rewrote his entire understanding of his family. He crossed the parking lot at near run. "Dad," he said, and his voice broke. "I'm so sorry. I thought she was helping you. I thought she was sacrificing for the family. I've been carrying guilt for months because I didn't do more." I pulled him into an embrace. 45 years old, and my son felt like a child again, confused, hurt, needing reassurance that the world still made sense. "You were trying to be a good son," I said. "She exploited that. You're not responsible for her choices." "I have everything," he said, pulling back, wiping his eyes. Bank statements showing the withdrawal from Olivia's account. Texts from Simone asking for the money and explaining it was for your care. Voicemails. I even have recordings from last week when Olivia asked me about her college fund, and I had to tell her the truth. She cried. Dad, Olivia cried because her own mother stole everything she'd saved. For 40 years, I'd surveyed shipwrecks documenting what happened when structural integrity failed. I never imagined I'd catalog the same failure in my own family. "I'll testify to all of it," Marcus said. "Whatever the FBI needs. Whatever helps put her away." My phone buzzed. Agent Foster. "Mr. Chambers, we need you and your son at your property in 30 minutes. We're bringing the suspects back to the scene for formal evidence documentation and to serve final arrest warrants. Standard procedure for elder fraud cases demonstrating intent and opportunity at the actual residence." "My neighbor, Constance," I said. "She witnessed the violence. She should be there, too." "Already contacted her. She'll meet us there." We drove in convoy Marcus, following Lawrence's car, me riding with Victor Rossi, who'd stayed close through everything. When we pulled onto Palmetto Drive, I saw Constance standing on her porch, arms crossed, waiting. 2 FBI vehicles arrived 5 minutes later. Simone and Brent emerged from separate cars, hands secured in flex cuffs, looking small and defeated in a way I'd never imagined seeing. Agent Foster stood in my front yard, my property, my home, with an official document in hand. Simone Chambers and Brent Michael Culver. He said, his voice carrying the weight of federal authority. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit elder financial abuse, wire fraud, forgery of legal documents, and attempted theft exceeding $500,000. Combined federal charges carry exposure exceeding 20 years imprisonment." Simone's eyes found mine across the yard. "Dad, please," she said, and tears streamed down her face. Real or performed, I couldn't tell anymore. "Tell them this is a misunderstanding. I was trying to help. The debts were crushing us. I didn't know what else to do." "You're done lying, Simone," I said quietly. "These people have heard enough." Marcus stepped beside me, solid and present in a way he hadn't been for years. "You stole from your own daughter," he said to Simone. "You made me think I was helping Dad when I was funding your boyfriend's gambling addiction. You destroyed this family." Brent stood silent, head down, already broken. Constance moved to my other side. "You did the right thing, Leland," she said loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'm proud of you." Agent Blake stepped forward with handcuffs replacing the flex cuffs with metal restraints that clicked shut with the finality of a ship's hatch, sealing some doors once closed, never reopened. "Transport both suspects to Charleston Field Office," Foster ordered. "Separate vehicles. Mr. Chambers will need formal statements from you, your son, and Ms. Whitley this afternoon. 3 p.m. at the Federal Building." They led Simone toward one vehicle, Brent toward another. My daughter turned back one final time. "I'm still your daughter," she said. "You made choices that ended that," I replied. "You chose theft over honesty. You chose your boyfriend over your own child. Those were your choices, not mine." The vehicles pulled away. I watched them disappear down Palmetto Drive, taking with them the last remnants of the family I thought I had. Marcus's hand settled on my shoulder. "What do you need, Dad? I'm here now, for real this time." "I need to rebuild," I said, "starting with Olivia's college fund. The restitution hearings will recover most of it," Lawrence said, joining us on the porch. "Federal law prioritizes victim reimbursement. You'll be made whole again." We stood together, Marcus Lawrence, Constance Victor, watching my property settle back into peace. My home, my safety, finally mine again. Then Lawrence opened his briefcase and pulled out another folder, thicker than the first. "The forensic accountant found something else," he said quietly. "Simone has a second bank account you didn't know about. Hidden account. It has $400,000 in it." My blood went cold. "From where?" Lawrence met my eyes. "A second life insurance policy. On you. Taken out 6 months ago using your forged signature under the financial power of attorney, naming Simone as primary beneficiary. $400,000 sitting in an account you never knew existed." 3 days passed in deposition statements and evidence documentation while Simone and Brent sat in federal detention. Then on Thursday morning, we stood in Charleston Federal Courthouse for the arraignment. But before that Thursday arrived, Lawrence called me about something I hadn't anticipated. Lawrence's voice was steady, but his hands weren't as he spread the insurance documents across his desk. "When were you planning to tell me about Raina's veterinary appointments?" "What appointments? I haven't taken her to the vet since her annual checkup in March." He slid 3 receipts toward me. "Simone took her. September 4th, September 10th, September 19th. 3 different veterinary clinics, 2 weeks before she moved into your house." I stared at the receipts. Each one detailed wellness consultation with my dog's name, except I'd never authorized these visits. "Simone took Raina to 3 different veterinary clinics," Lawrence said, his voice carrying a different kind of revulsion. "September 4th, 10th, and 19th, 2 weeks before she moved in. She asked about euthanasia options at every clinic. Claimed Raina was suffering that you couldn't afford treatment." "Raina is 7 years old and perfectly healthy," I said. "Every vet refused and documented their refusal in writing. One called animal control. The FBI found it through the fraud alert it establishes she was willing to harm anyone or anything that stood between her and the money." I thought of Raina sleeping peacefully on the kitchen floor this morning, tail thumping when I made coffee. She'd trusted Simone. I thought of Raina sleeping peacefully on the kitchen floor this morning, tail thumping when I made coffee. She'd trusted Simone. They all had. A week later, we stood in Charleston Federal Courthouse for the arraignment. Assistant U.S. Attorney Rebecca Hoffman, mid-40s with the sharp intensity of someone who'd built a career prosecuting financial predators, read the complete indictment. "The United States charges 15 counts of federal crimes," she announced. "Count 1, conspiracy to commit elder financial abuse. Count 2, wire fraud. Count 3 through 7, forgery of legal documents. Count 8, identity theft. Count 9 and 10, attempted insurance fraud. Counts 11 through 15, violations of federal elder protection statutes. Combined exposure exceeds 30 years imprisonment." Simone stood in orange detention uniform, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. When the judge asked if she understood the charges, she turned toward the gallery where I sat. "Your Honor, my father is elderly and confused," she said. "This is a terrible misunderstanding. I was trying to help." "Miss Chambers," Judge Patricia Sterling interrupted, late 50s with steel-gray hair and no patience for manipulation. "The evidence includes your own recorded statements discussing timeline optimization for insurance payouts. It includes forged documents in your handwriting. It includes witness testimony from bank employees, your daughter, and your own father. There is no misunderstanding here." "Bail. Denied. Flight risk danger to potential witnesses' pattern of predatory behavior. Remanded to federal custody pending trial." Brent got the same. Neither could post the $500,000 bail, even if it had been offered. I'd spent a career documenting disasters. I never imagined the worst wreckage I'd catalog would be my own daughter's soul. After arraignment, AUSA Hoffman pulled Lawrence and me into her office. Your daughter has done this before, she said without preamble, sliding files across her desk. 5 times that we've confirmed. South Carolina, Georgia, Florida. 8 years of targeting elderly victims. Total theft exceeds $2 million. 5 victims. 5 families destroyed the way mine nearly was. Same pattern every time. Special Agent Daniel Foster added, appearing in the doorway. Establish relationship as caregiver or concerned family friend. Move in or gain frequent access. Isolate the victim from family. Secure power of attorney. File guardianship. Drain assets. 2 of those victims died under suspicious circumstances. We're reopening those investigations. She's not desperate, I said, understanding finally settling. She's a predator. Your maritime documentation broke the case open, Hoffman said. The timeline analysis, the injury photographs, the audio recordings, it gave us the template to go back through cold cases. We found patterns in banking records, legal filings, medical claims. You connected all 5 victims. That afternoon, Lawrence drove me to probate court for the emergency hearing on Simone's guardianship petition. Judge Sterling reviewed the evidence file, 3 inches thick now with Lawrence's additions. Mr. Chambers, she said, looking at me over reading glasses, your documentation of this fraud demonstrates exceptional mental acuity and strategic thinking. This petition is not only denied, but dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, I'm ordering the petitioner to pay all legal fees you incurred defending against this frivolous filing. Thank you, Your Honor, I managed. I just want my life back. You have it. This court affirms your full legal competency and condemns the attempted exploitation documented in this file. We'll be forwarding this case to the South Carolina Attorney General as an example of elder financial abuse prevention. Justice moved like a cargo ship, slow, methodical, but once underway, impossible to stop. Back in Lawrence's office that evening, he showed me photographs of Simone's other victims. 5 faces, all elderly, all isolated, all financially comfortable before she entered their lives. 3 are alive, Lawrence said. 2 died, 1 from a fall, 1 from medication error, both while under Simone's care. Their families want to thank you. Your evidence package became the template for prosecuting all 5 cases. I just documented my own case, I said. I didn't know there were others. You broke open a serial predator case. The FBI Elder Crimes Unit is calling it the most thorough victim-generated evidence file they've ever seen. Other victims will testify at trial. Your daughter won't see freedom for decades. My phone rang. Marcus. Dad. His voice was tight. Olivia's asking questions. She knows Simone was arrested, but not why. She wants to see you. I looked at Lawrence, who nodded gravely. What do I tell her? Marcus asked. I thought of my 15-year-old granddaughter, whose college fund her mother stole, whose trust would be shattered by truth, whose childhood ended the day her mother chose crime over family. Tell her the truth, I said. All of it. She deserves that. Olivia arrived on a Saturday morning 2 weeks after Simone's arrest. I watched her walk up the driveway from Marcus's car, shoulders squared like she was bracing for impact. She'd asked to hear the truth directly from me, rather than piece together from news reports and whispered phone calls with relatives. I respected that. At 15, she had more courage than her mother had ever shown. Raina bounded to greet her, tail helicopter spinning, and for a moment, Olivia was just a kid again, crouching to accept enthusiastic dog kisses. Then she straightened, and the weight settled back across her features. Grandpa, she said quietly, come inside, sweetheart. I'll make tea. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd first discovered the forged power of attorney, where I'd planned my investigation with Lawrence and Marcus. Olivia wrapped both hands around her mug like she was cold despite the December sunshine streaming through the windows. Everyone at school knows, she said finally. They're talking about Mom being arrested, calling her a criminal. She is a criminal. That's not gossip, it's fact. I kept my voice gentle. But that doesn't mean she stopped being your mother, or that you're responsible for her choices. I should have seen it. Should have known something was wrong when she kept asking about your bank accounts, when Brent started showing up all the time. Her eyes filled, but she blinked the tears back furiously. I suspected something months ago. I just didn't want to believe she'd actually... That's not on you. Simone made these decisions. She chose to see me as a source of money, rather than as her father. She chose Brent over her own family. You couldn't have stopped her, Olivia. I barely stopped her, and I had decades of experience reading people for dishonesty. She was quiet for a long moment, staring into her tea. When she spoke again, her voice was steadier. What's going to happen to her? Trial's in 3 months. The evidence is overwhelming surveillance footage, financial records, recorded conversations. Her lawyer's pushing for a plea deal, but that's between her and the prosecutors. I reached across the table, covered her hand with mine. Whatever happens, you'll always have a place here. College funds being restored. Your life moves forward. The doorbell interrupted us. Lawrence stood on the porch with his briefcase, wearing the satisfied expression of a man bearing good news. Court order came through, he said, pulling papers from the case. The $47,000 Simone transferred from Olivia's education account is being returned in full. Should post to the account within 5 business days. Olivia's breath caught. I thought that money was gone. Mom said she'd invested it, that it was tied up in lease, Lawrence said, not unkindly. She spent some of it, but the majority was still traceable. Judge ordered full restitution. Your grandfather made sure of that. The weight in her expression shifted grief, mixing with something like relief. Not happiness too soon for that, but acknowledgement that not everything was lost. Family could reconfigure. Trust could rebuild slowly on different foundations. Another knock at the door brought Dr. Emma Garrison, the veterinarian I'd called to examine Raina. Simone had been feeding her regularly small mercies, but I needed professional confirmation that no harm had been done during those weeks when my daughter and her boyfriend had controlled my home. Dr. Garrison was early 40s, efficient and warm, the kind of professional who'd seen enough to recognize subtext. She's in perfect health, Dr. Garrison announced after a thorough exam in the living room, Raina tolerating the stethoscope and gentle prodding with patient dignity. Weight's good, coat's healthy, no signs of stress or neglect. Whatever else happened here, your dog was well cared for. That was something. Simone had stolen my money, forged my signature, tried to institutionalize me against my will. But she'd fed the dog. I wasn't sure whether to feel grateful or just sad at how low the bar had fallen. Over the next week, Marcus and Constance helped me reclaim the house. We found Brent's things in the guest room, cheap cologne, wrinkled clothes, a paperback thriller with the spine cracked at a violent chapter. Simone had taken over my office, her laptop still sitting on my desk beside spreadsheets, tracking the money she'd planned to steal. We boxed everything, labeled it for the FBI's evidence collection, removed every trace of their occupation. Constance brought groceries, real food, instead of the pre-made meals Simone had stocked. Marcus rehung the family photos Brent had taken down, restoring my parents' wedding portrait to its place above the mantel. Lawrence drafted the documents returning my medical and financial power of attorney to my own control, filed the restraining orders that would keep Simone and Brent away, even after their eventual release. The house felt like mine again. 2 weeks before Christmas, I hosted dinner, small gathering, just Marcus, Olivia, Constance, and Lawrence. We ate lasagna. Constance had made drank wine. Marcus brought from some special reserve, talked carefully around the crater Simone's absence had left. But we talked, we laughed, we functioned. Olivia helped me wash dishes afterward, her hands sudsy and competent. I'm glad you're okay, Grandpa, she said quietly. I'm glad you fought back. So am I, sweetheart. So am I. After dinner, as Marcus and Olivia prepared to leave, my phone buzzed. Email from Assistant U.S. Attorney Hoffman, with subject line, trial date set, victim impact, statement requested. Lawrence saw my face. You don't have to testify in person, he said quietly. But I knew I did. Simone needed to hear what she'd cost me, not in dollars, but in something far more permanent. I spent 3 weeks preparing that victim impact statement, writing and rewriting, until Lawrence finally said the words were right. Standing in that federal courtroom in late December, looking at Simone, while the judge asked if I had anything to say before sentencing, I delivered every carefully chosen line. Told her she hadn't just stolen money, she'd stolen my ability to trust my own judgment. My belief that family meant something permanent. She'd looked away, couldn't face it even then. Now it was January, and the sun rose over Charleston Harbor, the same way it had every morning of my 68 years. But this time I was truly here to see it, not just surviving, but living. I stood on my waterfront porch with coffee warming my hands. Raina pressed against my legs and watched the first light paint the water in shades of amber and rose. The harbor looked exactly as it had that September morning when this nightmare began. But I wasn't the same man standing here. A lifetime spent surveying damaged ships had taught me the difference between vessels that could be saved and those that had to be written off. I'd climbed into holds that reeked of seawater and rust run my hands along cracked bulkheads, calculated stress tolerances and failure points. Professional work, methodical and unemotional. I never thought I'd have to survey the damage in my own family, document my daughter's betrayal, with the same clinical precision I'd once used on corroded hulls. The trial had ended 3 weeks ago. Simone got 12 years in federal prison, reduced from a potential 30 through a plea agreement that required full cooperation with investigators pursuing her other victims. Brent got 8 the same way. The sentences came down the gavel struck, and I felt nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction, just the hollow finality of a door closing forever. Other victims had testified. 2 elderly people, Simone and Brent, had targeted before me, their children weeping in the gallery. The prosecutor called it a crime spree. I called it the death of my family. In my victim impact statement, I'd told the court what she cost me. Not the $420,000 she'd tried to steal, not the property or the accounts, or even the months of fear and investigation. I told them about trust, about the specific kind of betrayal that comes when your own child looks at you and sees nothing but a bank account with a heartbeat, about lying awake at 3 in the morning, wondering what I'd done wrong as a father, what I'd missed, where the woman who used to bring me drawings from kindergarten had disappeared too. Simone had said nothing at sentencing. Her lawyer spoke. The judge spoke. The prosecutor laid out the facts in brutal detail. But Simone stayed silent, eyes down, while her daughter sat in the gallery, beside Marcus, and watched her mother go to prison. I'd spent 4 decades teaching captains how to read damage reports, how to decide what could be salvaged and what had to be abandoned. Now I understood on a level that went beyond professional expertise. Some vessels can be repaired, with enough time and effort, and some you just have to let sink. Raina's ears perked at the sound of a car in the driveway. Too early for most visitors, but I recognized Marcus's Subaru before it rounded the corner. The passenger door flew open, and Olivia bounded out with her overnight bag and a stack of college application materials, all gangly 15-year-old energy and genuine smile. "Grandpa," she jogged up the porch steps, "I brought my scholarship essay drafts. Can you read them after lunch?" "Of course." I pulled her into a hug, still amazed every time at how tall she'd gotten, how resilient. She visited every other weekend now, a comfortable routine that anchored both our weeks. "How was school?" "Fine. Busy. I'll tell you about it inside." She crouched to greet Raina, who offered enthusiastic kisses and a helicopter tail. Marcus followed more slowly, carrying a grocery bag. "She's been talking about this visit all week," he said quietly. "Thanks for being here for her dad. This is exactly where I want to be." After Marcus left, Olivia and I worked in the garden together. January was early for planting, but we could prepare beds, turn soil plan, the spring layout. She asked about my maritime career, the ships I'd surveyed, the ports I'd visited, anything but Simone. We had an unspoken agreement not to talk about her mother unless Olivia brought it up first, and she rarely did. The silence wasn't avoidance. It was healing. "Tell me about the biggest ship you ever surveyed," she said, kneeling in the garden bed with dirt under her fingernails. It was a tanker that survived a hurricane off the Carolina coast. Everyone thought it was a total loss, but when I inspected the hull, the structure was fundamentally sound. Just needed proper repairs and a good captain willing to trust the vessel. "Like you," she said, glancing up. I hadn't thought of it that way, but maybe she was right. Maybe survival was its own kind of victory. Marcus returned for early dinner. Constance stopped by with her famous lemon cake. Lawrence called to check in, his voice warm over the phone line. The community that had helped me survive Simone's betrayal remained visible and sustaining a network I'd nearly lost but managed to preserve. What does it mean to win when winning costs? You, your daughter, I had my answer. Now it means you survive, you protect who's left, and you build something new from what remains. Evening settled gently. Olivia and Marcus took the guest room, the house filled with the comfortable sounds of family running water, Quiet conversation, Raina's claws clicking on hardwood floors. Normal domestic peace, so ordinary it felt like grace. Later, after everyone settled for the night, I returned to the porch alone. Harbor lights reflected on calm water ships navigating safely to port, their running lights steady in the darkness. I'd spent 40 years helping vessels find safe harbor after storms, assessing damage, and charting courses through dangerous waters. Now I understood. The storm itself wasn't the failure. Ships are built to weather storms. What mattered was surviving, finding harbor, dropping anchor in water calm enough to heal. Olivia was safe. My home was mine. The harbor was calm. That was enough. That was everything. "Come on, girl," I said to Rhina, who'd followed me outside. "Let's go inside. We're home." The storm had passed. The harbor lights reflected steady and sure. I was home. And to you, listening to my story, remember this, family. Betrayal cuts deeper than any other wound, but survival is possible. Looking back, I wish I'd seen the signs earlier. I was so focused on being a good father that I missed the moment Simone stopped seeing me as her dad and started seeing me as an opportunity. Don't make my mistake. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong, even when it's your own family, even when it breaks your heart to admit it. The lesson I learned: protecting yourself isn't betrayal, it's survival. When your child weaponizes your love against you, documentation becomes your lifeline. I spent 40 years investigating fraud, but the most important investigation was the one that saved me from my own daughter's greed. I believe God gave me those skills for a reason, so I'd be ready when my family turned on me. Sometimes the hardest dad revenge isn't about punishment, it's about refusing to be destroyed. That's what dad revenge against family really means: choosing to survive. If this story resonated with you, please leave a comment below and tell me what you think. Have you ever had to fight back against someone you trusted? Share this video with anyone who needs to hear it. And if you're new here, subscribe to Dad's Sweet Revenge for more stories about justice, survival, and the complicated truth about family loyalty. Thank you for staying until the very end. Your time means everything to me. One last reminder: this story contains fictionalized elements for storytelling purposes. Any resemblance to real individuals or events is purely coincidental. The message, the lesson about standing up for yourself, is what I hope stays with you.